All right, cool. Music is started. Like the mic is coming through okay. All right, time to get a little bit, center myself on the old camera. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 90 of the Pathfinders podcast. I'm Trio 311. I am your producer and host of the show. And together we'll be charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen, Squadron 42, and their development. And tonight we're going to be talking about something that for many has been quite nebulous. And unless you knew where to dig or read things religiously like I do, it's been a very nebulous thing. And so we're going to take a look at the recent update for medical coming with the Apollo that they just announced. The design brief came out on Friday. Yeah, Friday. Sorry, it was a drill weekend, so I'm still a little bit discombobulated. Followed by the update on Death of a Spaceman and Regeneration. And then we're going to take a look at the path forward for CIG and for Star Citizen with some context. I've covered the context part multiple times in other shows, looking at different things. Like, I did a Regeneration explanation where I went through all the Regeneration lore. We're not going to go through all of that. We're just going to take a look at one specific paragraph at the very beginning that everybody seems to just gloss over. But I'll highlight the fact that there's a lot of regen lore. Because, people are like, oh, Regeneration's dead and it's just going to be rapid respawn. And I'm like, I don't think it's it. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I don't think it is. I don't think they would have gone so far to create such detailed lore and a plan that so closely follows what they'd been intending all along to just wrap it a couple of years later. But then we'll also talk about some ideas for things that CIG can do to achieve their vision while also not making the game too punishing and giving players more choice. It's always been sort of the remit of Star Citizen and CIG that players should have lots of options and lots of choices, and those choices should be meaningful and have consequences and pluses and minuses. So we'll talk a little bit about that, both as we're going through the design brief and then after. Ghost 360, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by again. Hope you're doing well. Axis, what's up, buddy? Pardon me, hiccups. I'm having my cocktail. It always makes me have like hiccups. Hey, hi, Prince of Dragon. Good to see you in chat. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Anybody do anything interesting? Yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and switch screens, and we will get started with the design brief. Ghost 360 says, Orgnite, Big Hathor op, fun time. Did you guys do the whole thing? I did most of a Hathor site by myself the other night, or last week. Hathor is great fun, but man, it sure did highlight, the even at this juncture of Star Citizen's development where it's still not punishing enough, but the need for a medic, and the emphasis on playing together, playing with others, because it was a struggle. It was a struggle, and it was a long slog to do one mission, and it's like, yeah, you just bring some friends and you go through it a whole lot faster. A lot of the way through, but it was fights and bombs for an hour after we fired the laser. Good. Yeah, I didn't evacuate to heal myself, but I ended up with 4 tier 3 injuries. Both arms, chest, and my head all had tier 3 injuries. And so every couple minutes, I was having to, and I went through 2 of the med gel cylinders in my med gun. both not only and several med pens too, because I got really low a couple times, but just treating my health and treating the symptoms of my injuries so that I could keep fighting. Because even at a tier 3 injury, like, you notice it, especially with how quickly you can move and the sway of your aiming. Yeah, the Ursa is a great little ground ambulance. It is awesome. The Nursa. I'm really looking forward to the Apollo. I think for right now, the Apollo, the Apollo's best use is probably going to be with tier 2 beds. Maybe even 2 tier 2 and 3 tier 3. I can't remember the last. I've only seen a handful of tier 1 injuries, and so you really don't need to be respawning cross systems. So you really don't need a tier 1 bed a lot. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if we get some changes to injuries and injury rates with this patch. I haven't heard anything about it yet, but we shall see. Ghost 360. So the idea was, if you heal a lower tier injury with a higher tier bed, it's less. It costs you more resources. Not as effective. It's the same. It's just a gamification of what happens in real life. It's horribly cost ineffective to treat a cold at the ER. That sort of thing. But yeah, it's a good. What we've had for a while is a good starting point for first aid and for being the combat medic. But there's a long ways to go for CIG to achieve what they want. And I'm sure they're not going to make it. They're not going to make it all the way. Get everything they want for 1.0. Of course not. But I if they, with Death of a Spaceman being on the release view for 1.0 and being a core feature, they do need to expand on it quite a bit, as well as make it more punishing, and the cost. I think the best thing is the cost of the amount of resources you use, and the cost of them is a good starting point. I think I digress. Let's get into it. I love this image. This is a really cool image. We need this interaction. And don't make me just drag players. Give me the option to carry them or something as well. The old fireman's carry, or NPCs. That's too cool, for it to not be in the game. Obviously, it'd be a bit difficult to animate, but CIG can make it happen. So, first and foremost, all the basics of here for medical gameplay, the injuries, the drugs. We have like one new drug, and that's it. That's in 4. Came with 4.2.1. When did radiation come in? Was it 2.1 or 4.3? But for the most part, this is very much unchanged down to here from what we got in 3.15. And I didn't realize how many people didn't know that this design doc existed. This came out with 3.15 when medical healing tier 0 released. That's how we know that there's a lot more that CIG wants to achieve for medical and healing, is that what we have is tier 0, and other features that are much further along and have far more depth to their gameplay are at tier 2, before CIG went away with it from the tier system. And we have gotten nothing since then. And I don't think just saying that we consume Medshell now is gonna constitute tier 2. I think that we are basically at the first baby step on our way to what would be the tier 2 version 2 level of features. Oh man, yeah, Ghost 360, the animations, and I know a lot of people in my Discord, and probably people have heard me on the Captain's Table and other shows. I hate the beam. I hate it. Hate it. Doesn't need to exist. But it's fine for a first go with 315 where they introduced it. I think now we're at the point because so they released medical in 315 in 2021, fall of 2021, and right about this time is when the actor feature team, along with a lot of other teams, Naz and I did a big podcast on it detailing everything because they told us what teams went to work on Squadron and be focused on Squadron. The actor feature team, the vehicle feature team, UI, a number of teams, basically the majority of the gameplay folk. Not the entire teams, but a substantial part of it. And so that's why this feature, among others, hasn't progressed any further because they got the basics in there. But as we'll find out, they couldn't expand on it more until they got other gameplay systems in, much of which has been part of Squadron's development. But that's why we got this basic system in without animations and such, why we're using a healing beam rather than taking your med gun and using the inverse kinematics animation system that was developed for Squadron, the interaction system. So that way you scan somebody, and scanning remotely is fine. That's perfectly fine. But you scan with your gun, and I imagine they'll probably tie that into your suit and your visor in the near future as part of specialization. But then you dial up whatever drug you want to use, based off the injuries and everything. And then you get close enough to trigger the animation, and it, just like in Star Trek, doesn't, it's a split-second thing, not even half a second long. And so people saying, oh, it'll lock me in, it'll interrupt my gameplay, blah, blah, blah. That's part of medical. If you want to get treated, hold the fuck still. The complaint is of being locked into the animation is invalid. The animation should be long. We shouldn't be doing anything else other than using the med gun in the 30th century. Everything should be an injection. Maybe, I could see some. I would love to see. I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's a few things that I would love to see that aren't you use your med gun to do an injection into, say, like a port that's standardized on every armor. That makes too much sense. It's perfect, and it's an animation that takes you no longer than you pushing the button on the door. Which, if that's part of the game, if you can't hold still, if you're not going to complain about the animation to push a button on a door, then you need to shut the F up about an animation to just give you a quick injection. Yeah, beams are peak sci-fi for a lot of things, like tractor beams. There's no other way to do that. And that makes perfect sense. A mining laser, it's not a magical beam, it's a freaking laser. We have lasers now. It's not a difficult thing. But a magical beam that somehow transports medicine through not only your body armor, but also a flight suit that protects you from the vacuum. No, that's dumb. It's just a symptom of tier 0, not tier whatever. And the reason they did that is because that's what was allowed them to get the system in, so that way they could iterate on it. Because the animations and making it look good is not a crucial thing to being able to get the gameplay in. A medical laser. Okay, so how does that laser somehow get medicine into your body through all of these protective elements? It's there's, and Jared has said, people, when asked with that quote that people say, asked Jared about Beam Citizen, and he said, yeah, it's because it allows us to get the gameplay feature, and then so we can iterate on it and test it and stuff without having it being held back. There are no nanobots, High Prince of Dragon. There are no nanobots. Not a thing. There is no there is no light beam force field thing that magically transports the nanobots into your body. I don't know where Paul got that idea that that's part of the lore and that's how that works, but I think he just headcanoned that in, because I've never seen it. And no one knows the lore about medical gameplay and regeneration better than I do. Paul's knows everything and has great context, but no one has read all of this and more about regeneration and all the other stuff about medical more than I have. Promise. There are no nanobots. You can read the lore about Bioticore and Cure Life and everything. There's no nanobot. And if even if it were, I would rail against CIG, but that's stupid. Nanobots that okay, sweet. Why haven't the nanobots been weaponized? It doesn't make any sense. It's just a nature of development. It's easy to get a beam in, to make it so that way you can have the interaction of healing somebody. Well, not healing. This is just the beam. All it does is transport medicine into your body. They aren't healing nanobots. It's just medicine. It's a drug, and so there's no. It's not a teleportation thing. But and I will fight Paul on this. Paul and I agree on like 99% of things. He and I are very simpatico, both in our criticisms of CIG, but also in how we feel about the things in game and such, and particularly the lore. But this is one of the very few things that I'm like, no, Paul, unless you can throw out a citation, and I've asked him to, that's not a thing. So, design brief medical gameplay. Star Citizen's persistent universe bolsters a comprehensive, ever-evolving medical system. Designed for both self-application, it is definitely not comprehensive. The framework is good. And I like the beginnings of the design, but it is not comprehensive at all. Designed for both self-application and administration to others, from minor injuries to complete incapacitation, with multiple levels of treatments and utilizing a variety of vehicles, clinics, and hospitals. Medical gameplay combines aspects of survival mechanics and altruistic service to others to provide a continuingly developing experience that touches everyone. So it is comprehensive in that we have hospitals, we have the med beds, we have your med gun. There's a med gun on here. No, we have the Cure Life medical tool, and we have the multi-tool with the lifeguard attachment. But the only gameplay we have is symptom treatment and upping your health with Hemazol. That's all we have. That's the only gameplay we have. I don't think hopping onto a med bed and just press button go is gameplay. I think it's a very basic system. So I think it's very generous to call it comprehensive when the only gameplay we have is symptom treatment. But we do have a variety of vehicles, and that's part of the argument, is that we have a lot of medical vehicles, more than most other professions other than combat. But we have all the medical vehicles do is med bed, which isn't there's no gameplay. Just as we explore many of these aspects, new and old, and ensure you're properly equipped to face the universe in Alpha 4.3.1 and beyond, and if you're looking for additional help to get started in medicine, check out the guide system to get paired with an experienced player who can show you the ropes. Note, this post is being released to coincide with Alpha 4.3.1 PTU. So, injuries. Injuries are inflicted when you sustained repeated damage. They can be received on your arm, legs, torso, or head, and are shown to you either via the heads-up display, on your helmet, in the bottom left corner, or via scan. Below are the different types of injuries and how they affect you. So, minor injury, and again, none of this is new. Pardon me. The lowest level of injury decreases your maximum health pool. and introduces several gameplay effects depending on where you were injured. A minor injury tier 3 will to these areas will have the following effects. Arms, your weapons will become harder to aim, your damage, the damage done by melee attacks impaired, and a cumulative reduction in health pool with other injuries. Yeah, so when I had 4 tier 3 injuries, I forget what the number of my total health that I could heal myself up to with Hemazol was, but I want to say it was 60 something, maybe 70 something. It stacks up pretty quick, and so if you take a few more rounds, I was getting towards the end and very glad I was, because I was gonna get close to getting higher tier injuries very quickly. And basically that just makes it so you can be downed very easily after you get injuries. And that's why I like the system, is it makes sense. So legs, movement speed will be diminished and a cumulative reduction in health pool with other injuries. Again, same thing. Torso, reduction in overall stamina and regen, so the regeneration of your stamina. Audible wheezing and a cumulative reduction in health pool with other injuries. I have noticed that there are some bugs with the audio portion, where even after I treated my symptoms from my chest injury, the audible wheezing didn't go away. And I'm pretty sure that's a bug, because obviously that's a problem. You shouldn't have to scan yourself to know that, hey, the drug has worn out on your, that you gave to treat your injury. You should be able to be like, oh yeah, all of a sudden I can't sprint as far and I started wheezing again. Better give myself another scan. Yep, time to redose. Head, blurring of vision, muffling of audio, reduction in impact effect resistance. So that's the the knockdown. Delay in stun recovery, and again the reduction in health pool. Hey, the prisoner, good to see you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for stopping by. Minor injuries can be treated on site or by any medical bed and do not require stabilization. So stabilization is important, but it says minor injuries can be treated on site or by any medical bed, and so that's why it's important to use the correct language, because this is not necessarily clear. So when they say minor injuries can be treated on site or by any bed, they're talking about treating the symptoms, not healing the injury. And I think that they should have included the verbiage to say minors can be treated, not healed, on site. And that would be another thing, is they need to make sure that they have a clear delineation between treating symptoms and healing the injury itself in the verbiage, so that way people aren't confused by it. And do not require stabilization. So stabilization is another thing that I've never seen, but I've been told it's in game. But it's something that needs to be much more impactful. And I think the stabilization aspect is something that we will probably see in the next iteration of medical gameplay. And I think we're going to see, I would be very disappointed and surprised if we don't see more iterations come down the pipe very soon, because they said that they have people working on medical right now, and I don't think they were just saying, oh, we're going to work on this just for the Apollo and then go back to something else. I think they are on a prolonged sprint on medical to get medical caught up with the other professions, to lay the groundwork for Death of a Spaceman. They can't just do this and then let it sit for another year if they want to start making progress towards making the game a bit more punishing in anticipation of Death of a Spaceman, because they don't want to surprise us with that. They need to ease you into the really hot tub with it. Yeah, like using Sterigen, exactly. The prisoner. So tier 2, moderate injury. Moderate injuries incur all the same penalties and effects of minor ones, with expanded and more pronounced effects and a few new additions. I just got started, and I got a little bit ahead of myself, so you didn't miss much for the prisoner, I promise. But with what has changed, I like the change in that it's going in the right direction, because there is cost. and it's significant, and it will get people starting to play more in line with how they should be playing. It's not a huge deterrent, but it's not an insignificant deterrent at the same time, if that makes sense, I guess. I mean, people that and I think CEIG became aware of this with how often people were using the backspace express just to teleport. And just teleporting and leaving abandoned ships lying around. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 4.3.1 the number of abandoned ships we see goes down. Now, the problem is they didn't make it so there's a cost for regenning at hospitals and clinics. Yeah, and the prisoner, I still think that is a very high likelihood, and we could get there, but I'm fine with it not being too punishing right now. I do think it's a necessary thing, but I think people's argument against the, we need more beds being able to respawn is coming from a false premise that I'm going to hopefully be able to sort of dispel tonight and make people understand why I'm so against it, because I just don't think it's necessary. I think that the regen is supposed to be rare, and I think that regen is supposed to be rare, respawn is not, and that's the difference. I think regen via tier 1 beds isn't needs to be rare, but respawn at a clinic it shouldn't be. I think that you should be able to respawn very easily, but like that's the when people talk about Star Citizen wasting their time. Oh jeez. Oh, that startled me, sorry.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
That one's a little bit loud, so it caught me off guard. Galladrum, thanks for the follow. Thanks for stopping by. No when I appreciate the follow, and I appreciate you coming to hang out with us this evening. It's just when I change the sound alert volume for you guys on your end, I don't think it necessarily changes it in my headphones the way OBS listens to it. So even though it might be a fairly normal volume for you guys, it's the standard volume without change from the original soundbite for me. And so it always comes through a little bit loud. Exactly. Yes, NPC rescuers. Yep, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, because that's a big thing. And I think it's vitally important for a lot of reasons. But I think with tier 2 injuries, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and this is the beginnings of why I love the basis of this system, because it is, whether CIG did it intentionally or not, like if they didn't do this intentionally and they just stumbled upon this system, holy crap, because the way it gamifies in a believable way pharmacokinetics is insane. And critical care pharmacology is something I teach to new flight paramedics and flight nurses, and have been teaching for a while. So it's like a subject that I'm very well versed in and also very passionate about. Because if you have a really good understanding of pharmacology, you can treat your patient while mitigating your risk of doing harm. And that's where this starts coming into play. So moderate injuries incur all the same penalties and effects of minor ones, with expanded, more pronounced effects and a few new additions. So the moderate injury to these areas will have the following effects: increasing the severity of existing impairments and limiting your ability to throw items. So if you see right here, tier 3 injury on the leg, and suggested drugs, demexitrin, symptoms relieved, muscle fatigue. Now you have a tier 2 injury, same leg, but you have muscle fatigue and impaired mobility, requiring 2 different drugs to treat it in order to return you to normal function for a time. So now what happens is by doing 2 drugs in order to treat that, plus the hemazole in order to get them healed back up when they initially take that injury, to pump back up. This one tier 2 injury will shoot your treating it will shoot your blood drug level up way higher compared to a tier 3. But you don't generally I don't think it can happen. I think you have to have a tier 3 injury now, the way it works, before you get a tier 2 injury. So if you have a tier 3 injury and you get hit again in the same area with repeated hits, then it can progress to a tier 2 injury. And that's where the stabilization thing comes in. We'll get to that. But it makes it so that way your ability to... Oh, sorry. Oh. All right. Sorry, I should have pre-rolled that. I apologize. So I'll keep going because I do download these VODs and upload them to YouTube, and so I don't want to have a big old gap. But so that's why this is really cool, because it's the same thing that happens in real life. If I only give you one medication, and this gamifies what happens in terms of the concentration of drugs in your bloodstream, but then basically what happens is a lot of medications that we give, especially in the trauma and critical care emergency medicine environment, they don't float around in your blood so much as they are bound to proteins in your blood, but there's only so much room on that protein bus. And so if you give one drug, a certain amount of it will be bound to the protein, and then it will have equilibrium between how much is bound on the protein and then how much is, hey, socially confused, good to see you. Again what? Oh, good to see you. Thanks, man. But so if you give one drug, half of it will be bound to these plasma proteins and half of it will be free floating in your blood, circulating around your body. And the amount that's free floating in your blood circulating around your body is the part that goes into the cells and acts on different receptors and stuff. But if you have 2 drugs that are both competing for the sites on those plasma proteins, that means that you had 10 spots and 10 of them were taken up by the one drug, and then you had 10 more molecules of the drug out and free floating. Well, now if you have the same amount of 2 different drugs, well, 5 spots will be for one drug, 5 spots will be for another drug. But then you'll have, if you gave, say, 20 micrograms, then you'd have more of each drug floating around in the circulation. So you'd have a higher blood drug level. And that would make it so that way the effects of those drugs would be more pronounced. That's why we get those symptoms of the overdose when your blood drug level is too high. It's literally gamification of what happens in real life with real life pharmacology. That's why it's so impressive, because I've never seen a game that does that ever. There's been some great games that do really cool, like combat medic, treatment stuff.
Part of the crew.
Assessment.
Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Hey, Fat Old Lion, thanks for the follow.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
See, I was expecting it that time. Yes, well, there's a difference between synergistic effect and the people will often confuse a synergistic effect where something that you give actually potentiates the action of something else versus, hey, we give 2 drugs that both I'm trying to not get too into the weeds on it, because like this is a multi-day thing that I teach. But it's basically saying that you only have so many seats on the bus, and if you give more drugs, that are all competing for the same number of seats on the bus, you have more drugs out, in circulation. And so if those drugs act on the same receptors or have the same sort of side effect profile, then you're going to get the unintended side effects of those drugs more than you would if you were only giving one of them. Like for me, if I'm, let's say fentanyl, for example, I sling a lot of fentanyl. It's a great drug for what I do. If I just give fentanyl to somebody, say my size, and they're in a lot of pain, I give them, 100 micrograms, 1 microgram per kilogram, then, that's pretty good. But then if I give, say, if I want to give fentanyl plus ketamine or fentanyl plus Versed, different drugs, different classes, but they compete for the same plasma protein spots, and they act on similar receptors, and so you get more of the same drug out in circulation, which takes you from the therapeutic level that you want right here to getting closer to those toxic effects, to the side effects that everybody gets worried about. And that's what will happen right here. And that's why what we have in Star Citizen is so cool. It isn't impactful enough because we don't see these higher tier injuries often enough, because so many people just respawn, or they just have easy access to healing. But this is what in the Army's Medical Center of Excellence, which is what basically the where everybody medical goes for training in the Army. The motto is conserve fighting strength. And so as the medic with this guy right here, it's when Battle Line, I kid you not, when this first came out with 315 and we learned about it, I was like, no fucking way. Are you kidding me? These fucking nerds gamified pharmacology? What the fuck? No way. How? Because I wouldn't have thought about that. If there's a game that does this, I don't know it. I've played a lot of games, and I'm sure there's probably some really high, the really high speed sim games that do more. But like anything more mainstream, I've never seen anything like this. But yeah, so you get your tier 2 injury and you're trying to treat it. Well, you treat it once, your blood drug level goes up, and then blood drug level comes down, but you also have the effectiveness of the drug wearing off. And then so you treat it again, blood drug level goes up. And what you have is you get to a point where you can't treat this person anymore. You need to get them off the battlefield because they are no longer combat effective, and you cannot conserve that fighting strength anymore with what this is. You're just trying to buy time until you can get them to evac, or buy time to finish the mission, or buy them time to self-evac, out of the danger zone, so that you don't have to drag them. Yeah, if only they could implement elevators. I mean, thank God they're working on the new transit system, because the transit system and long-term persistence, was just talking about long-term persistence in Paul's Discord, but there's a handful of systems that were refactored or got started being refactored to be compatible with server meshing, that they are compatible. They're minimally compatible. Like it's hanging in there, but we're pushing up against the capabilities of what these systems can do, and they really need to refactor them to get them to where they need to be for us going forward, as well as just address some of these long-standing fucking bugs. Holy shit. But like this system has stood the test of 4 years. We're literally at the 4-year anniversary of when this came in. And the logic of it is incredibly sound. Now, obviously, there's a lot of levers and that's the great part. There's a lot of levers that they can pull in order to balance it and make it really interesting and dynamic. And it also leaves a lot of room for them to implement even more levers that make it more cool, like with Starware. Starware everybody thinks about starware as like, oh, it has pockets, or I can wear, armor over, clothing and such. It's like that. That's not that. That's just the icing on the cake. Starware allows them to do a lot more in terms of properties than the basic implementation that we have now, in terms of damage resistance and heat and cold resistance. That's what starware is the next evolution for, and what people don't realize. And then tier 1 severe injury. Oh, and let's see. Minor injuries do not require stabilization. Moderate injuries can have the symptoms stabilized by on-site treatment or a medical bed of any size, but require tier 2 unit or better to heal. And so that's the stabilization didn't come in with 315, and I found the post a month or so ago. Pretty sure it's not in here. Yeah, it was in here. They did. So, let's see. Where's... And that's they talk about stabilization, but like, what the fuck is it? Well, and LTP, like LTP includes the stuff persisting from patch to patch. And so like right now, part of the limitations of long-term persistence is you get your home location reset every patch. And you get, people's ships get reset, they lose components, lose items in their inventory, and that's part of the issue. Is everybody starts over, and things persist mostly, but we're not supposed to be restarting every patch. You shouldn't wake up back in your hab at Microtech or wherever with every month. And that's the problem, is right now with this patch cadence that we're at, every month we get a new patch, and every month you have to put your components back on your ship and blah, 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 blah. It's a lot. And so it does make it really hard for people to progress in the game, and it also takes up a fuck ton of time. And so that's another one of those points of friction that's, really rough on people. But yeah, so severe injury. So severe injuries escalate the effects of moderate injuries even further with additional complications. Severe injury to these areas will have the following effects. Increasing the severity of existing impairments, adding the hurt locomotion effect involving limping with audible grunts of pain, and inflicting arm lock, preventing you from being able to hold objects or weapons in your hands. Legs, increasing the severity of existing impairments, forcing you into a prone state with no ability to stand or crouch. Torso, increasing the severity of existing impairments and adding the hurt locomotion effect involving limping with audible grunts of pain. And then head, same. Severe injuries can have their symptoms stabilized by on-site treatment or a medical bed of any size, or require tier 1 unit or better to heal. And so right now, stabilization is just you treating those symptoms. But we need stable, like one thing they've talked about in the past, and I'm not going to go digging out the link of it, but they've talked about how injuries are like potentially tier 2 and tier 1 injuries are timed. And so not only do you have to stop bleeding, but if you keep walking on a leg injury, or you keep using an arm injury, abusing it without ultimately treating it, then it can progress to the next tier of injury. And they've talked about using that for stabilization in the future as well. Yeah, I don't upgrade my ships. The only thing I've done is I bought I took the Gatlings off my Idris and I put on what are the Hurston I'm brain farting the Herson repeaters. Yeah. But yeah, we don't have you get an injury and it's static. It doesn't get worse. Your symptoms return as the blood drug level wears off. But the more injuries you have and the higher tier your injuries are, the more difficult it makes it for the medic or you to conserve your fighting strength. And it basically does, again, what happens in real life. Story time. Lance Corporal tree in August of 2004. I was in the Battle of Najaf, Iraq, and my platoon, reinforced, was clearing a portion of the Wadi Al Salam cemetery in the city, which is the largest cemetery in the world. Google it, you'll be like, what the fuck? One of the other saw gunners in my squad took a 3-round burst from an AK-47 at very close range to his chest plate. It basically kicked him like a mule. And he had bruised ribs. Essentially, he had a tier 3 injury to the chest. Oz Veteran, this is already in the game and has been since 3.21. So what are you talking about? This is a core element of the game. So it's not totally stupid. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. There you go. Because this is a core element of the game. You can't have Death of a Spaceman without medical and healing. Death of a Spaceman is part of the release view for 1.0. The fixing of bugs and getting other core elements that other teams are working on, these things aren't mutually exclusive. DIG's 1100 freaking people. Get a grip. It's not silly immersion. This is gameplay. This is what makes the game interesting, other than it just being Call of Duty or Battlefield in space. This has always been the plan. But yeah, so that's why I really like the injury system and the drug system that we have in the game, because it does a good job of it is just a game, except for it's a game where CIG has been working forever towards making a life in space sim, and they have talked about the importance to them literally hundreds of times about believability. That's what this is. It's gamification of what goes on in real life. It's gameplay for people who want to be medics. It makes it so that way you don't just Zerg rush all the time. It makes it a better game. Yeah, it's more than just ships shooting at each other. It might not be your gameplay. Hey, Mount Center, good to see you. 07, thanks for stopping by. Well, and like Arma is them in an entirely different way. Like Arma has all the animations for wrapping the wounds and doing a chest seal, and depending on what mod. There are other games that do this sort of stuff in a different way. I like this because this is meant to gamify human physiology with 30th century technology. Rather than me slapping a bandage on your leg, I am using a med gun to, it should be inject drugs. There shouldn't be, a beam, but we talked about that earlier. That's just a development of the feature. Yeah, Ozveteran isn't a troll, but he's wrong. and sorry, I've got all the fucking receipts. Like, you don't have to like medical gameplay. You don't have to engage in it. Play with other people. But that's part of like my argument for NPC trauma teams. Why I made that video is you shouldn't have to like medical gameplay, and you shouldn't have to interact with it. You carry your hemas all around and don't get shot. But if you do, call an NPC medic. Don't, if you don't want to play with other people, don't play with other people. You just like with ships, like everybody's, people worry about engineering and like, well, I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to repair my ship, blah, blah, blah. Then don't. That's what NPCs are for. You go to the station and you land there and you get your ship repaired and you get your ship refueled, you get your ship rearmed. Like you can do it, do it yourself or with other players, or you could just pay the game to do it for you. Like that should always be an option. I'm just fine with it. But this system encourages you to play with others. Yeah. And more importantly, like the reason I'm so for NPC trauma teams, the reason I did that video, and you know what? Shameless plug. If you haven't watched the video, I'm going to put the link in chat right now because I'm very proud of that video. And the more people that see it, the more likely that CIG will see it and be like, yeah, this is a good idea. We should do what this tree guy says. Because the basis of for the video is it's all using things that are in game or that they've developed. Like the dropship reinforcements. What if it was a Cuddy Red with an NPC that ran out and did the basic medic behavior that they have in game right now that the NPCs use on each other? Tell me that would be difficult for CIG to implement. You're outside, Cuddy Red lands, as close as it can to you, and drops off. A medic runs out, hits you with a hemazole, and gets back in the ship and it flies away. At a minimum. Obviously, they could expand that a whole lot more. You walk over to the Cuddy Red, you get an interface to say, oh, I need a tier 2 bed, send me a Terrapin. I need a tier 1 bed, send me an Apollo. They come get you up. You make your way, over to the bed, the ship. You get healed. Blah blah blah. It's not that hard. Obviously it's not like super easy, but that's absolutely something that the game should be able to do. Yeah, they've already got it in. The NPCs already revive each other. They've been talking about, they've been refining those behaviors for the NPCs in the monthly reports for months now. And if NPCs can do it to each other, they can do it to you. They just have to, tell it to do it on request. And with the dropship reinforcements, like, the dropships, right now, I think that they only work in certain areas around certain environments. But in the future, it's supposed to be able to, like, they can go, they will have the logic to say, okay, you need to land as close to this point as possible, and it will just find an open location, generate a spline, ship go down, land. But that's part of the other behaviors that they've been working on, and why the dropships have come back, is they've been working on the ability for NPCs to transition between navigation areas, navigation zones. And that means the NPCs are just being designed to be able to get out of the ship and then walk onto the nav mesh that they have talked about. Go find you out in the forest, and then hit you with the hemazole, hit you with the med gun. Because you could say, put it in your request to say, hey, get me up and then stabilize my injuries. And the cost scales based off what you ask them to do. And the game does it. And if you're in a structure, you don't even have to have the ship, or you could just have the ship land at a landing pad around that structure, or outside the structure, or even in a hangar or something like that. There's a lot of logic that they can include into it. But the medics or the trauma team can literally just spawn out of a spawn closet like any other NPC. Make it happen, CIG. All right, sorry, tangent. So on-site treatments. I feel like there's supposed to be a picture here. Why is there nothing here? It's an awful big gap. On-site treatments. While many of the injuries you sustain throughout your exploits in the verse may require more robust attention and care, there are still a number of ways you can extend your time in the field. Conserve the fighting strength, but it's not just fighting strength. Yeah, I don't need DCS level startups. I understand if people want that. And I don't say CIG shouldn't do it, but sometime in the future. but still giving players the option to not do that. Like, that's what I think medbeds should be, is we need doctor gameplay that rewards you for being good at being a doctor and healing injuries. But we should also have the auto heal. You know, it should incentivize you for using a doctor and for someone having high doctor rep for the healing of injuries. Just like they should do the same thing for being the medic and be like, oh yeah, this guy's really good at dosing his drugs. You know, he kept us in the fight longer than anyone I've seen. Yeah, that should always be an option. Yeah, we're still waiting for night vision and remote lock unlock. Yep. So there are still a number of ways you can extend your time in the field. And again, this is not for combat. Eventually, you know, we all know that mining can injure you, but there's meant to be there's meant to be more risk, and I expect to have more risk from the other professions in the future. But like, you know, if you've got a quota to reach for mining or salvage or something like that, you know, a timed mission, you know, you don't want to come off that contract in order to go get healed. But if there's a medic nearby, be like, hey, can you get me treated up? Whether we're off on your own or in service to another system, prepared adventurers and good medics alike can keep an array of tools close at hand. From single-use consumables to trusty healing tools, there's a variety of gear that allows everyone to keep you and your team upright and in the fight. Drugs, stabilization, and blood drug level. So, yeah, night vision will come in because we do need to be able to just navigate around in the verse. You know, like walking around in the dark, you are blind other than that little flashlight. Yeah, it'll happen. It's just it's one of those things that's not the priority right now. So, stabilization is a temporary way to manage the effects of injuries. By administering the correct drugs, you can suppress these effects for a limited time, allowing you to keep moving, fighting, or escaping danger. Stabilization is not a cure. The injury still exists and will need proper treatment later, but it can buy you a crucial window of time where you can perform at full capacity. Battle line, the box missions aren't in because the little receptacles are broken, and so they have to get those working with server meshing again. But I think they want to refactor those and replace those with like the mini freight elevators that they talked about using for reloading like ammo on ships and such. Because like if you've done the ASD contracts, the Onyx facilities, and you've gotten some of their little like server blades, and you're like, I go drop a server blade in this giant freight elevator to turn in the mission. Now we need a little mission box in every hangar, and then at locations for not only, you know, delivering like 1/8 SU or other packages, but just anything of a certain size. But yeah, so that's stabilization. Blood drug level. So while stabilization is crucial and necessary, it does carry its risks. As all drugs will increase your blood drug level. Your BDL is tracked next to your health status on your helmet. Once this level reaches 50% of maximum, you enter an overdose state. This will affect your traversal speed, blur your vision, add a weapon sway effect, and may even cause you to pilot your ship or vehicle erratically. Additionally, you will begin to take damage slowly unless those overdose effects are countered. Oh man, I'd love to have the investigation missions back. Those were old. But even if they brought them back with, you know, like more ships and put like loot on the ships, loot on the bodies, cargo on the ships, that would be, you know, great. Yeah, box missions are very cathartic. And then using the Cure Life medical tool. The Cure Life medical tool can detect injuries and diagnose the health status of any person by targeting specific limbs to see inflicted injuries. This tool has 2 separate modes, basic and advanced. Basic mode simply applies Hemazol quickly, similar to the multi-tool's capability. Advanced mode lets you apply 5 different medical drugs, not including canoiodide, deliberately in precise doses for your choosing. To switch between the 2 modes, as well as adjust drug quantity, hold the tool up using the right mouse button, then hold the F key to interact with the tool screen. So again, unchanged, but that's what stabilization is. Now, this is basic stabilization. I also want to see stabilization that requires a med bed. I want to see, hey, I've got a tier 3, a tier 2 injury. I want to be able to go to a tier 3 bed, I've got a tier 3 injury, and I want to be able to go to a bed and say, tier 1 injury, or tier 2 injury, and be able to go to a tier 3 bed and stabilize that injury so it doesn't transition to the next injury or cause you to be downed. I feel like a tier 1 injury should have a timer on it before being downed. Because essentially, like, a tier 1 injury is like severe internal bleeding, and like destroyed organs and limbs. Let's see. So Hemazol stops bleeding, we know that. Demoxitrin relieves muscle fatigue and concussion symptoms. Roxafen alleviates symptoms that hinder movement, such as severe injury to legs or arms. Sterigen relieves symptoms caused by muscle weakness or respiratory damage, such as a chest injury. Resurgera used to reduce BDL over time, as well as symptoms caused by an overdose. Now, I also want to see Resurgera changed, so when I've used it, I didn't instantly feel the effects of my injury again. And I feel like it needs some balancing, so that way, if you get to the point where you are overdosed, you have to be very careful with your detox spend in order to not then underdose you and put you back into your injured with symptom status. It should be better balanced. And then radiation symptoms for canoiodide. Incapacitation and rescue beacons. See, I like the med gun, but I want to see the auto mode removed. Basic for applying Hemazol. Auto just says, okay, it doesn't give you the option for the right dosing. It just get rid of that part and just say, okay, you scanned them. It tells you what their injury is and the recommended drug, and then you have to pick the dose. But then with picking the dose, you have to, and this is why I always use mining gameplay, and this is why CIG used mining gameplay as an example. You need to get the dose in the right zone in order to, you got to get them in the green. And not necessarily in the green, but like a green, yellow, red, and like red on this side, the low end means that you increase their blood drug level without getting them to the therapeutic effects. Green on this side, or red on this side, means you overdose them. But then getting them in here, that green sweet spot, gets them the therapeutic effects, like that for the longest period, so that they're back in the fight for longer, but at a reduced blood drug level. So it rewards you for getting it right. By giving you more time, but also a reduced blood drug level. So you could, if you're a really good medic, you could treat more injuries for a longer period without overdosing someone by being skilled. And I hate the beam. I want it to be an animation, because we have an animation We're to inject the drugs here. But how does that same drug get from here to here via the beam? Dumb. Just, you're already right there. All you have to do is apply this to chest port or upper arm port on either arm. And so that way you just, you press F to, you have the thing, and then you press, you click to interact, like pull the trigger. It does the quick animation of done. That's it. Yeah, injection ports. Yep. That is peak sci-fi. Absolutely. Now, animations need to come before 1.0. Now it's center. We've waited too long because it's not a difficult animation. And the problem is, the reason we don't have the animations is because they were developing the inverse kinematic system for Squadron. If you remember the part of the presentation in 2023 where they showed all the physicalization of you have the target and then it moves you and then does the animation regardless of your orientation to the target. They use that system for the animation to you do the injection. And then it's just one animation built into the system because you don't need multiple animations for the same device. The system just knows that this is your target. You have already selected your drug and dose, and you click and it does the interact, but you have to be within range, and then it automatically just moves you really quickly. But it would be a quarter second animation. And so, but again, get into cover, tell the person not to freaking move. If you want to get treated, you got to stop moving. It's just gamification of what we do in real life. Obviously, if I wanted to give somebody drugs in real life, like it takes me several minutes because I have to get the drug out of my pack and I have to draw it up and decide, okay, do I need to start an IV or can I just do this in an intramuscular injection? And then I have to expose the site and then inject it. Like this, you go, we go to the 30th century and we go from what takes me, 2 to 3 minutes sometimes. It's overrated. I mean, and that again, player choice. If you're good and you're fast, absolutely. But and I don't want the beam at all. I don't want that at all. If you're right there, all he has to do is extend his arm to port right here on the chest or on either arm, based off what's closest. Because the system, the inverse kinematic system, is smart enough to say, okay, this is my target. This character is my target. I've got these 3 options for the animation. Boom, done. I guarantee you they plan to move away from the beam because they specifically said that the beam was just there to get the gameplay in so they could test it. That was a question that Jared was asked and he answered. Because that's the thing is if you're this close, just make the animation. Just make it happen. Make it happen for believability. But right now, you could be literally around the corner, like 5-6 feet away, and it works. It's like, nah. Yeah, I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying CIG has built the tools to make it work. They've already built the tools. That was part of Squadron 42's development, to develop the feature of the inverse kinematic system to make it so that way they didn't have to bespoke animation all these things or fake it. They made the inverse kinematic system so that way they wouldn't have to fake things like this. But this came before inverse kinematic. That's why the actor feature team went to Squadron to develop inverse kinematics, so that way we could have cool animations for things. And that way they could come back to Star Citizen and make things more believable and more realistic. So incapacitation and rescue beacons. When are we going to get these actual boxes there, CIG? Despite your best efforts, there will come a time when you've sustained significant damage, your health is at 0%, and you fall to the ground unable to move or function. Congratulations, you've been incapacitated. Oh, thanks. And the clock has now started. The good news is that all hope is not lost. If you have friends or allies nearby, they can administer a dose of Hemazole to get you back on your feet. But if you're alone with no help in sight, you can create a rescue beacon by holding the M key and call someone to your attention. Triggering a rescue beacon, aka medical beacons, will create a beacon mission found in the contracts manager and send out a notification to the HUDs of any nearby players. The payout for rescue will automatically be set to a 15,000 UEC reward, which is not enough. I don't know what their plan is for this. I just want it, whatever it is. I have no idea. You know, we've seen this image. We've, you know, I think these things are like props in game now. They don't do anything, but we were never told what the plan was for it. Yeah, look at No Man's Sky. Everything is with the same beam tool, and it's cartoony as fuck. I love No Man's Sky for what it is, but CIG should never take the No Man's Sky approach. I don't know about 10 times that, but like at least several times. Like 15,000 isn't enough. Yeah, the beam works for No Man's Sky. The beam works for lots of little space games. Astroneers. Oh gosh, what's another one that's like that? But it's totally fine for those sorts of games. Not a life in space sim that places an emphasis on believability. And people are like, oh, well, you're just saying that. I'm like, no, go to Starchives. Here. And they stopped updating Starchives after 2023. Believable. 124 videos containing believability. 19 videos containing believability. It's an important thing to them. They realistic. 269 videos containing realism. 94 videos containing realism. To say that it's not important, CIG, is patently false. Others accepting these missions. Others accepting these missions can apply on-site treatments, bring you to a nearby ship-based medical bed, or transport you to the emergency medical drop-off areas located in all hangars attached to a medical facility. I have never seen someone actually do that. Yeah, when people say not important, usually mean I don't want that. Yeah. That's what the game is. It's what it's always been intended to be. Get the help you need before the incapacitation timer runs out, or you'll regenerate wherever your next clone is imprinted. They made the mistake of using the word clone. Regen isn't cloning. Narrative was very clear on that. Leaving a corpse behind to be looted by anyone who finds it. And this was written by the community team. This wasn't written by the narrative team. So the medical hangar elevators aren't working yet. I've been told they work. I've never seen one used because, like, you get paid simply for hitting somebody with a hemazole. That's the problem. Is there's also, it's just a straight 15,000 reward. Yeah, I've never seen one used, but I've been told they work. Obviously, like, why would I? Yeah, and that just makes it so that way you can fly someone all the way there and get paid if you don't revive them, which would be fucked. It doesn't, none of these things change your payout. And so it's like, why would you do anything more than just revive somebody? Why would you heal them if they're not going to pay you for it? Especially now, because if you heal somebody, like, you have to, like, there has to be a whole trust thing. Be like, oh yeah, I'll pay you $40,000. I'll pay you $100,000 to heal my injuries. And it's like, okay. And then there's no stopping them from getting up other than you shooting them. But yeah, I've never, and to be clear, I'm just saying this is what I've been told. I've never used them. I've never seen them used. I've just been told that they do actually work. And that you can get paid for this $15,000 for tractor beaming somebody into your ship, taking them to a hangar, at a station or hospital or landing zone, and putting them in the thing and sending them to the hospital. Yeah. So medical beds, and this is just a minor thing, but like, look at the size of the tier 3 bed and look at the size of the tier 2 bed. Like, this one looks bigger and it looks like it has like a bigger scan thing. This one looks more basic by comparison, whereas this one looks like you're about to go through a CAT scanner. 1K. Oh man, Pepperidge Farm remembers before we had all that inflation. I don't know, like, I feel like this should be the tier 2 bed and this should be the tier 3 bed. Just weird to me. Yeah, they do bug me. So medical beds are the mostly automated doctors and surgeons of the 30th century. These are your one-stop shop to treating, and I feel like this is disingenuous because it gives people the idea that healing gameplay will always just be put resource in, press button, and that's never been the intent. And even in the lore, it's not, mostly automated. There's a lot of automation, but it still requires teams of people in order to operate these things and take care of people. These are your one-stop shop to treating and healing all ailments and injuries, setting your next regeneration point, clearing overdose field drugs from your system, or just scan yourself to see what's up. On most medical beds are 2 terminals that house the digital medical assistant, one usually present at the foot of the bed, and another overhead that deploys after you've entered the bed or regenerated after death. If you're regenerating after death, the bed will also provide you with information relating to that death. To place another person on a medical bed, simply drag the incapacitated body in close proximity and select place in bed via the inner thought system, and they'll be revived. So if you have a med bed, but you don't have a paramed device or a hemazole or anything like that, you can just drag them over here, and use personal inner thought, and they'll pop onto the bed. Yeah, that's socially confused. I absolutely agree. I think there needs the spawn in, pop into existence thing is, but I think that's a lot of VFX and such. It's a very bespoke thing versus the inverse kinematic system is something that CIG is a one ring system that CIG will use for everything. Only if I can yell multipass. Yeah, Shady Phase, I've never liked it either, but I think it's okay for now. I'm fine with it even now. At 1.0 and Death of a Spaceman, I think it needs to go away if we get NPC trauma teams, an NPC like on scene revive, because that's the problem. Is we shouldn't have our only option for respawn being regeneration, and that's not how it was ever intended, ever. But yeah, we'll get to that point. So Medgel NU. Medgel is the substance at the core of medical gameplay that fuels and this is important, that fuels nearly everything from the limited healing capabilities of the multi-tool to the medical beds that bring people back to life. So remember, this is current as of this upcoming patch. I do not think we will stay with a single resource system. I think eventually we will get multiple resources for med beds and healing. But I think I don't know if that will be a pre 1.0 or post. But right now, it's fine to at least have a resource being consumed that costs money. It is recommended to keep smaller ones on your person and larger supplies in the storage of your medical bed equipped vehicle at all times. For the multi-tool and Cure Life medical tool, reloading works in much the same way any other handheld weapon would. For medical beds, inserting a full-size canister via port will reload the device. With some vehicles, ports are found on walls nearby the medical bed rather than on the unit itself. So this is in the Apollo, and you can see these are the ports right here for the... I think is the... Isn't that the port on the wall for the tier 3 bed? Oh, there's 2 of them. Confusing. Anyway. Yeah, work off the bill. Free. Heavy on the quotes. Well, Stark's reality, I totally get what you're saying, but it's a thing that doesn't need to change. And it's by making every respawn regeneration, it's a worse option for players. And that's why they designed regeneration around that only occurring with catastrophic death, because they don't want you to regenerate all the time. Well, they crafted this very detailed lore because it's much harder for them to balance the consequences of death of a spaceman and death having meaning and consequence. It's much harder if they have to give you a whole lot of lives because every death is regeneration, versus the only regenerations are where your body couldn't be conceivably recovered. You sustain, you hit this threshold of damage versus this one. The threshold of damage up here by getting hit by a size 10 bomb, warhead on forehead, versus the threshold of damage from player FPS weapons. And that's what they're going for. But again, that's a limit of the actor status system. It isn't a, well, plans change. It's a, well, no, the game hasn't been developed in order to realize what they wanted yet. And so that's why this is fine for now, because they haven't developed the systems to make it work. We're still working with actor status tier 1 and healing tier 2. Yeah, no, I especially because it said recharge. Like, I feel like you'll have to keep your containers and refill them. But we'll see. But so each tier medical bed has a different medgel capacity, and I think this part is a really good starting point. Tier 3 beds can hold 100 CSCU. I forget what C part is. You are playing a game, but it's a game based on believability, and it's a life in space sim. And that's why we have 30th century medical technology, so that way you don't die frequently. That's been the intent all along. It's no different than any of the other stuff that differentiates Star Citizen from No Man's Sky. It's why our ships are not designed to blow up, because they want it to be it is a sim. It is not a flight sim, a hardcore flight sim. It's not a hardcore space sim in that we have full Newtonian physics, although there is a very in-depth physics simulation for flight. But it's meant that CIG wants to stimulate everything in a way that is as many things as possible to be believable and understandable and immersive. And so that's why, like, we do have multiple lives. And not only do you have multiple lives in that you have multiple lives from being blown into atoms is the intent. And you have even more lives from being killed and revived. Yeah, a future life sim. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, say right now, I have been a paramedic for 2025, 14 years. I've been a flight paramedic for 8 of those. And I've been in EMS, started as an EMT, in 2007. And so I have 13 saves under my belt, people going into cardiac arrest and me bringing them back from death. 2 of those were trauma saves where somebody had been shot and one was a stabbing victim, and they had severe injuries, were bleeding out, and surgical interventions, blood products given, saved their lives. That's what I can do in 2025. That's the whole premise of Death of a Spaceman, is that as long as your body isn't obliterated, the majority of times, advanced medicine can bring you back. Yeah. Well, but again, this may not be fun to you. You don't have to do the gameplay. You don't have to do this gameplay. That's what other players are for. That's what NPCs are for. That's what the automated systems are for. But it's, you want to play the game. Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like, it's, a lot of this stuff isn't wildly far-fetched. If we only got to this point in 900 years, I'd be disappointed. But the gameplay you like. So Fat Old Lion, what's your favorite gameplay? What do you enjoy doing the most? Because I think that's the disconnect that a lot of people have. They're like, well, I don't want to deal with this, but I love this gameplay. And it's like, okay, well, why do you get your in-depth gameplay, but I don't? We physicalized cargo. We're physicalizing components. We have a resource consumption, resource network system. Yeah. I have zero interest in base building and crafting. So I'm just not going to do it. I might pay some friends to do it, but I'm just not going to do it. I have zero interest. I rarely mine. It's just not my gameplay. I have no interest in hole scraping or hole munching, but that doesn't mean, nope, not gonna build a hospital. I'm a flight paramedic. I don't want to be inside 4 walls. That I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. I get the patient out as fast as I can. Yeah, some friends want to build a hospital. I will absolutely bring them lots of patients. That's my gig. That's my bag. But like, I want in-depth gameplay for everybody. Does it make for a long development cycle? Absolutely. But like, I'm super excited for Maelstrom, for not only for the realism, the simulation of ship combat, damage to your ships, but also Maelstrom makes salvage cooler for people who want to salvage. Yeah, but it's, and the balance is challenge, absolutely, Fat Old Lion. But I think a lot of the balance lies in always having the or having the easy but not as effective option. You can use a med bed and use the auto mode, and it won't be, you'll get yourself healed, or you don't have to be great at any of those things or anything like that, but you can use the auto mode, you can use NPCs, you don't have to engage in the gameplay. You can always have someone else do it for you, whether it's player or NPC, and I think that's the biggest part of the balance. Now, we do need to make it so that way, like, things aren't too hard. It has to be approachable. That's why, like, when people are like, oh, well, I don't want, like, a surgeon simulator, I'm like, neither do I. That's why I love this, but in the med guns. That's why I like the mining example, because if you can figure out mining, you should be able to figure out medical gameplay. It shouldn't have, you shouldn't have to be a freaking wizard to really understand the basics of these things, but it should give you the opportunity to reward excellence while still having a low enough introduction threshold that it's approachable for anybody that wants to either give it a try or do it in the moment. Yeah, and that's on CIG, and that I totally agree with you. It's not going to be easy to balance, but I think they'll get there. As noted above, additional quantities of medgel can be stored in traditional cargo and storage locations aboard ships and vehicles. I would love for Medgel to be climate control or something like that, requiring specific storage, limiting how much you can carry with you, rather than just like, oh, I'm going to bring like 4 SCU containers full of this shit and never run out. But, and right now, and it's just in PTU, like one of these 100 CSCU containers is 100K. And that makes, headphones just like made a rough noise. Sorry. Hey, Cindy Sanderson, good evening. Yeah, shelf life, like real supplies, like all of my freaking drugs that have an expiration date, and many of which require climate control and can only be outside of a certain environment for a certain period. And we know that that's something CIG can do. They already have it in game. Yeah, timers and climate control, you know, especially like, you know, make it so that way, you know, if you're not transporting it in a medical ship, you know, you run the risk of loss, or you have to require special containers to transport it. Like, make the medical logistics is a huge business. It's a huge deal in the military. And so the logistics of this can't be super simple. It should be part of the gameplay. Yeah. No, there's a lot of things that they can do with it. So each medical bed can restore health and address bleeding without cost. So not in terms of money, but consumes Medgel to heal injuries. The cost of healing injuries is a flat 50 CSCU, regardless of how severe the injuries are. And I think that's the problem. One of the problems is the CSCU cost is too high, and there's no stratification for it. Why does replacing my liver cost the same amount of CSCU as a sprained ankle? Because that's like what the equivalent of these injuries are. You know, I think you know, a tier 1 injury should require 25 CSCU, you know, and a tier 2 injury, you know, 15, and a tier 3 like 5. You should be able to you know, it should encourage people to heal, but also 50 SCU means that any injury costs 50 SCU to heal, or costs 50,000 credits to heal. And so that dissuades people from healing their tier 3 injuries out in the field, and encourage, you know, it's not a good balance. I don't know. That's just my take on it. I feel like that there should be more stratification, but that based off of the cost. I don't think they should change the cost of the Medgel containers, but I think they should change the cost of healing to encourage more healing, and keep the cost of respawn regen high. Ooh, yeah, that's a thought too. Having, what if they like made like what if the container was like see-through, kind of like the vials, yeah, the that you put into your your med gun. What if it was see-through and like it changed color a little bit and had like little floaters or something? Like, you know, you're in a cutlass red, and you know the medic comes out and like, oh yeah, I'll get you healed up, and puffing on a stem, and come on back. I got everything you need. Yeah, 50K. I mean, it just feel in relation to, you know, I feel like the cost of healing is too high in relation to the cost of regeneration. Well, and Atlas, that is something that they've talked about. They I apologize, I'd have to find the source at some point for you, but that is something that they said they wanted, in that your tier 1 bed would use more gel to heal a tier 3 injury than a tier 3 bed. So it encourages you to use the appropriate med bed for the injury. So that way, like, people don't just run around with just tier 1 beds on their Apollo. It gives more it makes for more utility for the tier 3 beds, especially because they tier 3 injuries are more common. Would anyone trust a good dealer and say pyro? I don't know. It depends on their reputation. V2. Got to know how good your drug dealer is. Yeah, and I do think that this implementation is going to encourage people to use. The good thing about this, even though the cost is high, I think it's artificially high in order to get more people to do this, because it instead of, because the cost of healing injuries is high, it incentivizes you to use the stabilization gameplay more to keep people in the fight, versus, oh, I'm just gonna run back and use the med bed real quick. Well, now you can't easily do that because you'll use up your med gel and it'll cost you a bunch of money. But if you wait, if you wait a little bit longer, then what am I trying to say? I think it makes it a little bit more realistic. You don't go back to your battalion aid station as soon as you get injured with a low tier injury. You treat it out in the field and you suck it up until you get back. Imprinting and regenerating on a medical bed. But yeah, this is obviously not permanent or anything like that. This is just current for seeing, like, they put this out as soon as it went to PTU, and like, what if they make balance change? I would be surprised if they make changes in PTU. And so they'll have to go back and change this, but then again, like, they already put it out, and so people won't necessarily know to go change it. Yeah, well, and that's what the thing is. All of this does help encourage people to not use the Backspace Express, because even though Backspace Express will take you back to your the clinic that you had your regen at, or a hospital, well, if you wanted to finish your mission, well, now you have to fly all the way back. And so this does encourage you to use the stabilization gameplay more and continue the mission, and then go back to civilization and get healed. Yeah, I avoid backspacing at all costs because I try to play the game how I think that CIG intends it to be played. Imprinting and regenerating on a medical bed. Regeneration is a medical process which enables the total restoration of your being after death via your DNA imprint recorded at the location you set. By default, your chosen regeneration location is a hospital within the primary residence location you set when you first enter the verse. But as you travel the spaceways, you may want to transfer your imprint to a new location. This can be at another hospital, clinic, or ship and vehicle that contains a medical bed and has sufficient medical and medgel supply. There are 3 reasons your imprinted medical bed may fail to meet the conditions for successful regeneration, causing you to regenerate back at your designated home location. Medbed has been destroyed. Apollo go boom. Medbed's supply of medgel has been exhausted. Too many respawns. The medbed is outside of its effective range. And this, I hope that they keep this as a temporary mechanic, balancing mechanic, and that it goes away with Death of a Spaceman, and limitations on what beds can actually regenerate. Because your imprint is supposed to be tied to you via like quantum entanglement and constantly be updated. But imprints are also meant to be able to be transported. But it imprints as you go about your life. You don't have to like necessarily update your save point. Essentially, that's what it is a save point all the time. While most medical beds you encounter outside of hospitals are capable of imprinting and regenerating you into a new clone, provided they meet the listed criteria, below are the specific requirements for a successful regeneration into each bed. Yeah. Oh, Socially Confused. I have been wanting that mod for so long. Yeah. And they have... That was one of the goals. And I believe Starware allows for it. Or will allow for it. But you are meant to be able to have like little subcomponents or mods that you put on your armor / suit in order to give you abilities, I guess you'd say. And that was one of the ones I would love to see, because again, that's peak sci-fi. So tier 3 bed, all of these require 100 med gel to respawn, but you have a 50,000 meter range on tier 3 beds. Covers most gameplay areas. 8 million meters for tier 2 bed. That's a huge difference. Cover most planetary bodies, so a planet. And then 150 million meters of bed, so it covers most star systems. And that's for the tier 1. And of course, we know the ships and vehicles, clinics and hospitals. In addition to ships and vehicles, medical beds can be found in hospitals and clinics located in landing zones and stations throughout the persistent universe. They have all the same functionality listed above, but do not retain their dependence on medgel for operation. The other thing I want tier 1 beds to only be in hospital. I think clinics should only have tier 2 beds. If you get a tier 1 injury, you either heal it in the field or you go all the way back to a hospital. Tier 1 injuries should be a you fucked up, and this should be an inconvenience. Yeah, tier 3 beds, like, and for balance purposes, until they ultimately get rid of respawning at tier 3 beds, like I hope, I think should be even shorter, because 50,000 meters is a long ways. It should be like, you need to keep that thing at the location you're at, not like, 50 kilometers away on the other side of a mountain range. Yeah, Socially Confused. I'm gonna get there because I'm picking up what you are throwing down, my friend. Today and tomorrow. I love this shot. I really want this thick medic suit. All the design and functionality detailed above is being updated with the release of 4.3.1. If you've never participated in the brave and exciting career of a medical first responder, we hope this detailed look at much of what's involved will encourage you to do so, but our work doesn't end here. Medical beds, imprinting, and regeneration options are continuing to evolve, and you can continue to the next page for a glimpse at what's currently in development. So, things are currently in development. Things are changing. Now it's 50 kilometers for tier 3. It might have been 25 at some point, but it's been 50 for a little bit. Let's go up to next page. If you'd like to know more, always, because that's what we do here. Again, another really cool shot. And I really want to see blood on our armor. No, I want you to be able to regenerate at a tier 1 bed regardless of location. Whether it's on a ship, at a hospital, but I don't think every space station, because they're everywhere. Space stations are everywhere. Should have a tier 2 bed. Healing a tier 1 injury, getting a tier 1 injury should be a you fucked up and made multiple bad decisions and did not plan accordingly, and now you have an inconvenience that you have to deal with, and that is going to require you going back to a hospital. But hospitals should be, a full-on hospital should be ubiquitous enough that it's not a major inconvenience. It's not a major inconvenience to go to any hospital in the Stanton system right now. But Pyro, it should be an inconvenience to find a hospital. There should only be like 2 or 3. And the regeneration in Pyro should have prolonged side effect. Or maybe a random chance for a temporary an injury of some sort. I don't know. Oh yeah, Ackless, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that's more the payout of beacons is something that's really going to have to be tied to Star Sim in order to make it dynamic like that. Star Sim and the next iteration of Reputation, but also not only skill, but services rendered. Because right now it's just a flat 15K, and so you can get paid 15K just for reviving someone, but you don't get paid any more for healing or anything like that unless you do it on the honor system. So you need to be able to put out a beacon, whether it's for getting you revived on scene, and or stabilized on scene or healed on scene, and the payout is based off of reputation and services that you request. So it might only cost 15K to get somebody to fly out to you. It only takes a couple minutes to get there. They hit you with a hemazole pen, a med pen. But if you want to be revived and then stabilized, or revived and then healed, the costs go way up. Yeah, we absolutely need to be charged for regenerating, and we will. We'll be charged for regenerating and stuff, and respawning. I feel like they should have included that with this patch, but I could see why. If they're, I think there might be too much angst at first. I think that this is a good first step, but I think the having cost for because right now people will still backspace Express just for teleporting back to their home location or a space station, to use it as fast travel, and that's a problem. Oh gosh, I'm socially confused. So introduction. And this is Life, Death, and Life Again beyond 4.3.1. So, medical gameplay, like other systems within the Star Citizen universe, such as mining and salvage, is not a standalone endeavor. This first 2-sentence paragraph is very important. Is not a standalone endeavor within the overall development of the project. It is inexorably and essentially linked with several other systems like actor status, scanning, FPS traversal, beacons, and more. Which is why we got healing tier 0 in 2021 and nothing else. Then the teams that were working on this went to work on Squadron, and now they are coming back after having worked on systems that are going to further develop and allow for further development of medical. When I concepted search and rescue missions, I did a segment a couple months, was it a month or two back? One of the biggest things I talked about was scanning, and the radar and scanning system, both FPS and ships, was built as part of Squadron, and so they didn't want to do a bunch of medical gameplay stuff. And then they're like, this isn't going to work for what we have because now we're introducing this and we need to change it. Ooh, Atlas, I like it. Yep. Progressive fee structure. Yeah. But it also needs to be, impactful. It needs to discourage reckless. Even if you're poor, you're like, oh, well, I'm poor, so I won't have to pay hardly anything. I'm just going to go be stupid. Well, maybe that's not a good idea. Because of this, forward development is often dependent on outstanding work to related systems first, and it can often seem like this vital and important aspect of our intended Star Citizen experience has taken a backseat to other flashier systems. Well, because it has. But again, it can often seem like this vital and important aspect of our intended Star Citizen experience has taken a backseat to other flashier systems. Medical and healing and the respawn mechanics and death of Spaceman has always been vital and important to the experience of Star Citizen since the beginning. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. This unfortunate reality was compounded earlier this year with the release of server meshing, which had an adverse effect on beacons, which were not and still have not been fully updated and converted to the multiple star system reality of 600 players we have today. While Alpha 4.3.1 brings several new aspects to medical beds and restores some of the recently lost rescue beacons for functionality. That's what I'm waiting to hear is, are they working or are they not? Like, what functionality, like how are they being partially brought back and partially not? I need an explanation on this because I didn't see anything in the patch notes, but I only glossed over them. We wanted to take this opportunity to explore the intended future for regeneration beyond 4.3.1. This is not the comprehensive death of a spaceman we're still driving towards. I cannot emphasize this enough. But a brief exploration of some of the changes, they even italicized it, and additions we'll encounter along the way, all currently in development. All currently in development. They are working on this. Yeah, no, it's especially for Atlas and Fat Old Lion, like, you can't, just like the gameplay system itself, you can't make your introduction to the game be so painful. Which is again why, like, I don't want regeneration for every last death. Like, that would suck. Regeneration is meant to be expensive. It's meant to be punishing and discouraging and have side effects and stuff. And every regeneration is a life lost. And so, for players who are just learning the game and who will probably have, I mean, if they do it right, still shouldn't regenerate often, but you are more likely to make those big fuck ups early on in the game that will cause you to regenerate than somebody who's an experienced player who also has, 5 million credits in the bank and 6 ships and a base on a faraway planet. Like, yeah, I totally, I agree. Yeah. These things have to be approachable on all avenues, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, the gameplay needs to be approachable. The consequences have to be approachable, and it can't be super hand-holdy, but it also needs to not, like, fly bitch and kick you out of the nest. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever be able to get all of our lives back. I think that you will be able to do certain things in order to be like, oh crap, I've lost too many lives and now I'm going to go do this thing for a while in order to recover some of them in order to stave off the inevitable. Yeah, and medical, like, should be a UEC thing. The standard currency. Yeah, no, he did say that. He did say you'd be able to get more lives back, but I don't think, like, it should be a revolving door of like, oh, you start with 9 and you get down to 3 and then you work your way back up to 9 and then you get down to 3 and like, I I think it should be like a threshold thing. Like you can, because it's based off of your imprint viability score essentially. And so just how like with you get a injury and you can only heal your health up to a certain point. I feel like based on you can only, I feel like you should only be able to restore your imprint viability score to a certain point. Like not get lives back to full, I guess, but you can do gameplay to get some of them back. Something. Maybe some sort of deal with the devil. Jor it. Yeah, well, and socially confused, I think that's also something that people will choose to do. Be able to like start over again. Yeah, IVS on your respawn. Like essentially your IVS like runs down to the point where you can't regenerate anymore. But I feel like you should be able to recover a portion of your IVS by doing certain things, but you shouldn't be able to recover all of it. And how much you can recover, it goes down every time. So like the first time you do it, you get 3 lives back. The second time you get 2. The last time you get 1, and then you can't do it again. Yeah. Learn your. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? Yeah, pain teaches, pain retains. So, but yeah, the people have glossed over this paragraph, and they have glossed over the very important verbiage that CIG has carefully crafted into this, very purposefully, and said made some very outlandish claims. And now I'm just laughing at them because because I'm reading this for like the 4th time, and I'm like, oh god, guys, you guys are going to be made to look like fools because you didn't read, and it isn't even fine print. It's right here in front of us. But again, this is not the comprehensive death of a spaceman we're still driving towards, but a brief exploration of some of the changes and additions we'll encounter along the way, all currently in development. It is also worth noting that similar to every design brief we've done, the information within accurately reflects our current development intentions at the time of publishing, but we always reserve the right to listen, adapt, improve, or change features and designs in response to feedback, playtesting, design revisions, or other considerations to improve balance or the quality of the game overall. And I think that's the important thing is I feel like I have to continually remind and go over this topic and make more videos and get the word out there so that CIG does get the message that a lot of people do not want, readily available regeneration, that a lot of people don't want all deaths to end in regeneration the way CIG originally intended, and that a lot of people want more complex gameplay, but we need also options for players who don't want to play with others, which is, this is fine. It should encourage you, but it shouldn't force you. Gotta play the soundbite. Gotta play it. Do you motherfuckers read? No, you don't. So, life and death and life again beyond 4.3.1. Successful gamers read. Successful people in general. But as part of the critical thinking process is to read it again, read it a 3rd time, find other people who are good at reading, have them do the same thing, and then talk about it. Your review. Same thing if you're watching. Hey, Dibley, good to see you, buddy. Whoa, reading. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm gonna make a confession to you guys, and it stays within this room, even though it's going on the internet. People So ashamed. I do read. I'm probably subscribed to more journals than, probably 99.99999% of paramedics out there, and read infinitely more journal articles because of it. But I know my limitations, and I also know that just reading it for myself isn't good enough. It's important to read it multiple times to make sure you didn't miss things, and you correct yourself, and you reread it again once you've had an opportunity to rein in your own bias after you've consciously done so. But then to recognize that we're humans and collaborate with others in order to gain better understanding. I should put oh man, I need to put the Reading Rainbow, Reading Rainbow, song in here now. Yep, gotta listen to interpretation, and it's a process. It requires active effort. So, life and death and life again beyond 4.3.1. While much of medical gameplay is rightly aimed at preventing death, we must still do everything we can to prepare for the worst, while giving you meaningful and strategic options for getting back into the verse as soon as possible post-death. To that end, the following additional changes to medical beds are currently in development. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Gotta do the shameless plug. Sorry, I'm just gonna... Okay, so to that end, the following additional changes to medical beds are currently in development. Adding the ability to imprint on multiple medical beds at once. So I like the intent of this. I don't like that you have to physically go to multiple beds in order to imprint. Because the way the lore works for Regeneration, the way it was intended to work, is that you could only have one imprint, but your imprint could be moved, or you could just make a new one and update it. And I feel like you shouldn't have to stop at all these different locations to make all these different imprints in order to pick your spawn point. I think that's unnecessary friction, especially because imprinting is a medical service, and imprinting is going to cost you money. And if I want to not only have my imprint at Brentworth in New Babbage, as well as the clinic at Port Tressler, and another clinic, somewhere else, and on somebody's ship who is providing medical services in Pyro on their Apollo, or their eventual Galaxy or Endeavor, that's a lot of money to spend. Rather than, I feel like your starting home location will probably be free, which makes sense, and then if you choose to move it and make a new imprint, because the lore does tell you that you should imprint often as part of maintaining your imprint viability score, and keeping it current with you to prevent sort of that drift. And I would rather say, okay, I've created my imprint. and then if I need to regenerate somewhere else, have it be part of the interface that says, okay, I want my imprint transferred here. And then you pay the fee, it transfers it, boom, you're done. I don't think it's a worthwhile thing to make you just have to make all these extra stops just to create extra save points. Yeah, if it's quantum entanglement, then you don't need to make multiple imprints. You just need to make the one and have it be able to be transferred the way it was always intended. Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. I do understand that makes the interface a little bit more challenging to design, but tough shit, CIG. To me, I feel like that's a better system than just having to run around making multiple imprints. You know, I don't think that's a good strategic choice. I don't feel like that's a useful thing to include. I don't know. What do you guys think? Tell me what you think. Am I off base here? I feel like with the way it was written, it was good in that we could pay to have it transported somewhere else. You know, and I feel like gamification of that transportation so that it's instantaneous is perfectly fine. I don't feel like, you know, if you are just going to, you know, and that also plays into, you know, having only tier 1 beds imprint. You know, it doesn't make you have to go to each individual hospital. You can just say, you know, hey, will you fax my imprint to this other hospital so I can regen on Orison, because that's where I'm here, and I had a catastrophic explosion. I am totally fine with that level of gamification. I feel like that is a better use of players' time, and I feel like the creating multiple imprints is friction in the game that isn't useful. Yeah, well, and like I'm fine with multiple spawn points, just not multiple regeneration points. Like you pick a tier 1 bed, and that's where you regenerate. But if the tier 1 bed that you want to regenerate in doesn't have your imprint stored, you have to pay additional money. Like that would be fine for me. You know, to make it not terribly punishing, you're still having to respawn. You're still having to regenerate if you're doing that. But I feel like allowing for transportation of the imprints rather than you having to spend extra time imprinting all over the place is better for players. So adding the ability to choose which imprinted medical bed you wish to regenerate at. Adding new conditions which may limit regeneration, such as cooldown timers or regeneration limits before re-registration of an imprint is required. So what they're saying here is the cooldown timer is a uncreative way of describing how regeneration is supposed to have significant side effects. That basically say, well, you can't regenerate for a certain period of time. And so, but then what happens if you do die? How do they make that work? Are they just talking about at that bed? Or just in general? It's unclear, but that was one of the things that was originally part of all the regeneration lore, was that regeneration has significant side effects. Like you know, makes you feel like shit. Oh yeah. Oh, someone said hacking. But also, or regeneration limits before re-registration of an imprint is required. So, saying also that you can only regenerate so many times off of a specific imprint before you have to make a new one, which is another basically talking about imprinting, maintaining your imprint. But this is like the initial implementation. I think that there's going to be more required for you to maintain your imprint. That was the other thing that I thought was really cool, is the way that they described it is initially was that you could go to an imprint capable bed, but not all beds were capable of regeneration. But imprinting was widely available. It was like the equivalent of having a CT scanner. They're fucking everywhere. But regeneration was the equivalent of a tier 1 trauma center with trauma surgeons and all that stuff. Those are not widely available, but it made it convenient for you to maintain your imprint at the location that it was stored by creating an imprint somewhere else that would update it via the quantum entanglement. So you could have your imprint stored at the at the Brentworth Care Facility in New Babbage, but in order to maintain that imprint and your imprint viability score, you could do an imprint somewhere else in order to keep that score up. But if you did it at a lower tier bed or lower tier scanner, because it wasn't just beds, they talked about scanners too, that it wouldn't be as high of a quality of an imprint. Like it might hurt your IVS. So healing health injuries. So here's the pathway. Player is injured, go to medbed. Does medbed have condition? No. Does medbed have conditions? It does not have conditions. Then yes, then heal the player. I don't know. I don't like this flowchart. Weird. Does medbed have conditions? Yes. Does player and or medbed meet the condition? Yeah, does it have enough med gel? But then why does it say, does medbed have conditions? No. And then goes yes, heal player. Like, this is weird. But does medbed have conditions? Yes. So it's asking if it's a hospital bed versus a player bed. So yeah, hospital bed, no conditions. If no conditions, then heal the player. This should be here. Or no, it should go like from here and then around to here, not go through yes and then here. This part doesn't make it clear. But it does have conditions. So like a player bed on their ship. Does player and or med bed meet the condition? If yes, then heal the player. So you have your injury is compatible with the tier of med bed. No, then do not heal the player. Injuries that are healed are relative to the med bed's tier. Yeah, no, you don't test for the... Okay, yep, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, well, and... and this leaves it open for lots of things and lots of locations. Regenerate. Player is incapacitated or dead. Is shown regeneration UI and prompted to pick a location. So incapacitated, so you were downed or dead. You didn't even go to the downed. You went insta-die. You got hit by the size 10 railgun. This differentiation is already here. It's already in game. What we need is additional differentiation. Is shown regeneration UI and prompted to pick a location. Is the regeneration location valid based on conditions? So does it have med gel? Is it within range? Range should go away because it should just be tier 1 beds and quantum entanglement. If yes, then transition to loading screen and regenerates. If no, cannot regenerate here, pick another location. And this flow works for not only regeneration, but also respawn that isn't regeneration. That's all that we're asking for. And it's not a difficult thing, and it's what CIG has promised all along. So multiple imprints at once. The first key to this will be to allow you to have multiple imprints at different locations simultaneously, allowing you a tactical choice upon incapacitation if no help is available, or choosing where you regenerate next. These choices will fall into one of 4 categories. Landing zone, the last landing zone hospital bed you imprinted on. Ship vehicle, the last vehicle you imprinted on. Oh boy. 3 sneezes. How do you have respawn that is not regeneration? I'm going to get to that. Shad Z dash? Shady Z dash? Did I say it right the first time? Ooh. So we're going to get to that because that's what Death of a Spaceman always called for. That's what they talked about when they were concepting everything leading into medical gameplay first released in 3.15. They talked about it specifically in the very first couple paragraphs of Lore Maker's Guide to Regeneration. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Sorry. We're going to keep on track with this part, and then we're going to get to going forward. So home base, the last medical bed you imprinted on at a base you or your org own. Temporary, a bed which does not fall under any of the 3 categories above. For example, a POI location like Stormbreaker. And I hope they get rid of those. This is crap. It's okay for now, but really needs to go away quickly. Shady face conditions. Did you get 1 shot to the back of the head? Sans helmet. Or did you get mauled to death by a Valacar, as in, like, they ate you and you are being digested? But the language is very specific. We'll hear about that. So, medbed conditions. In Alpha 4.3.1, the medgel requirement was added to medical beds, providing another condition that needed to be met for successful healing and regeneration being stocked. In the future, there may be other conditions you encounter that affect or limit your ability to use a specific medical bed, either owned by another player or found in the wild. These are not global conditions, pardon me, applied to all medical beds, but specific states enabled by deliberate content or player action. Or like John Cruz said, were you floating in space and get hit by a railgun? Yeah. They use very specific examples multiple times to talk about why you would need to regenerate and what instances you wouldn't need to regenerate to respawn. So manual medgel. Panacea medgel is a resource that is... Oh, they did change the spelling. It is right. Cool. That is added to the medical bed by you or the unit to function. Added in 4.3.1. Auto medgel. The medbed requires medgel to function, but will automatically restock at a set rate. No one can manually restock the unit. So you could have this at a point of interest that would limit how quickly people could regenerate, how fast they could regenerate. So if it restocks at a set rate, so if too many people try to respawn, try to regenerate, then they'll have to regenerate somewhere else, or they'll just have to wait. Don't trouble me with your objective receipts at the ready, quotes and evidence tree. Well, in stations, I mean, I don't know, like, if stations will be auto med gel or just always have enough. I don't know if that will be how stations and hospitals work. Because you wouldn't want to run into an instance where you couldn't respawn because of a hospital bed. Yeah, because the way they talked about the hospital beds, they don't use medgel, but this is also in the future, so maybe it is. I don't know. No, they have not expired. They have not expired until CIG says they have. There is no expiration date on Richard Tyrer and Chris Roberts saying something until Richard Tyrer or Chris Roberts say it expired, or someone says what they said expired. And we don't have that. Haven't had it yet. Especially when this was said in like October of 2020, and then this reiterated it an entire year later. And it's also been reiterated in the year following this into 2022 by the narrative team, and had been reiterated multiple times throughout the years leading up to this. Sorry, I won't believe that any of this has expired until someone with authority tells me that it has. Certainly not players who haven't read it or heard it in the first place. Sorry, I'm going to be arrogant as fuck about it, because I've read all of it many, many times. I've watched all of it many, many times, because this is my gameplay. This is what I signed up for. This is what I've wanted all along. And so, and somebody's going to say it in chat, and I'm not going to lose my shit. I'm going to be calm about it this time. But when Jared said the only constant in development is change, he wasn't saying that everything could possibly change and everything had to change. And he was also talking a lot about how the path of development changes, because what has been constant for CIG has been delays and struggles with meeting deadlines, because they have been constantly changing priorities. Meanwhile, the concept for what Star Citizen is has not diminished ever in any respect. So why would the first time that something has diminished in the concept of Star Citizen be for medical gameplay and Death of a Spaceman? I'm waiting for an example that is similar to what people have suggested, where, oh, Death of a Spaceman is dead and we're going to have easy regen and everything's going to be regen. And I'm like, what? That is wild speculation, unsupported by anything other than this is what we have now, and that is currently in development and is one of many things that were on the way to development, and is not all inclusive of everything going into Death of a Spaceman. That's why we read this, because this is the context through which you interpret all of this, along with all the other context that came into it previously. This is in development. It's going to be an iterative thing. It's not all going to come at once. They're going to add these things. A lot of this stuff is in addition to what they've always wanted. Yeah, respawning is just a mechanic for Death of a Spaceman, not equaling not dying once. But there was always meant to be a respawn. It's in Death of a Spaceman. You were always meant to be able to be respawned as if you got rescued. But that was why they invented regeneration. So that way, hey, there's no conceivable way to explain that you got rescued after taking the railgun from the Idris hit to the face. Dark's Realities. Have you read Regen? Have you read this? Because they reiterated everything about Death of a Spaceman right here. All this is adding in that if we can't find your body, you have been vaporized, we can't conceivably heal you with 30th century medicine, that is why you regenerate. Everything else is meant to be explained away by you being either rescued by NPCs or a player can actually find your body and revive you. That's all that regen is. Regen was never intended for you to, every time you are downed and can't get up, you regen. It's exceedingly clear. But look at all these fucking words. And guess what? This is one huge page full of words, followed by an entire year, 2 years of lore makers community questions, where regeneration kept on getting brought up in different contexts and different questions. along with lore pieces that they then wrote about it, where they followed up on Regen to reiterate what they said about all of this. For almost 2 years, stuff continued to come out, but it all required reading of obscure things that no one reads except for people like me. Sorry, if that makes me come off as an asshole, I apologize, but only to a certain extent. Because again, receipts. Lots of receipts. Timestamps on videos, and there's more than this. I could find more leading up to this one over the years, but this is the most comprehensive thing because they were taught the way Richard Tyler explains this while he's talking with Chris is because Regen was in development as a concept and they hadn't nailed it all down, but they had the broad strokes. But we'll listen to this part here in a second. Which implies to you that they will fake reviving in that document. I just read through it and again still don't see it. Are you talking about the regen part? Yeah. So, while a lot of scenarios could have been explained away by diligent NPC emergency response teams finding injured players and bringing them back to civilization, which is what originally was talked about in Death of a Spaceman, with a game like Star Citizen, there were a lot of cases where even the bravest ambulance pilots wouldn't have been able to retrieve you. Imagine a bold explorer flying themselves directly into the sun, or some friendly outlaws firing a size 9 torpedo directly at your head. What ambulance is going to rescue you from that? While we could have declared those instances to be permadeath and forced the player to hand off everything to their next of kin, we were worried about how punishing this would be for people new to playing the game. That's why we needed to introduce that's all this is introducing regen in order to account for these types of instances. Because Death of a Spaceman is still relevant, and in Death of a Spaceman, they talk about, where is it? Yeah, it's all right through here. I see each character you play having the ability to die multiple times before the character is finally put to rest. This is like lives in an old school arcade game. So let's see, where's the... Science in the future is far more advanced than today. Medicine has the ability to bring people back from what would be considered dead in today's world. So, if you lose a dogfight and your ship is going to blow, you have a few seconds to eject. If you manage to eject safely and someone doesn't blast your ejected avatar, you won't have even used a life. You'll end up at the last planet you docked on with a new ship courtesy of system-wide insurance, blah, blah, blah. If you don't manage to eject in time, or someone blasts your ejected character, which carries a harsh penalty if you do this in civilized space, your badly charred and almost dead avatar is recovered and you wake up in a med bay. So, they want you to essentially be able to either be mostly dead, like when we're downed, or when you are downed and then you die, but you didn't get blown to pieces by a size 9 torpedo. If your body can be recovered, they want medical science to be able to revive you. And whether that's why, like I say, respawn is different than regeneration, because respawn can mean that you did die, but you didn't regenerate. They didn't print you a new body. So that's the separation. Or it can also mean that you didn't necessarily die. You just slipped into unconsciousness, and then you got transported back to the hospital and they revived you just like we have in real life. The vast majority of my patients nowadays are unconscious. And they wake up however long later after having been medically treated and revived. They didn't die, but they're close to death. I don't think it's questionable. I think that, like, if they talk about Death of Spaceman here, and then they say that they need to bring in a way to bridge the gap between Death of a Spaceman, what occurs in Death of a Spaceman, and these instances where we couldn't even get your body back. We couldn't medically explain why you were recovered. That's why we have to print you a new body from an imprint. And if you had to regen at every death, they wouldn't have gone to such great lengths with all this lore to talk about how they the intent is always to avoid regeneration and use medical at all costs, because regeneration is expensive and it has side effects, and it's still like, if you regenerate every time you die rather than having your body picked up and brought back and you get revived via advanced medicine, you've used the life that you didn't need to use. And that's why this is here, because they didn't want you to have to use all those lives at every freaking turn. It's only for these instances. But yeah, there's a lot. Let's get back to this. There's a lot of medbed conditions, and I think this is good because this is a starting point. And it allows them to tailor a lot of things to content. No, and Stark's reality is I am fully on board with fade to black and wake up in medbed for rescue. I think that fade to black and respawn, and that's the thing, is the actor status system does not allow for separation of the two right now. We have actor status tier 1. We need more actor status. We need more actor status features to allow for separation between what should occur with your body got blown up by a size 10 railgun and I slipped into unconsciousness because I got shot, but I did die, or I did die, but I can be revived. Does that make sense? I am totally fine with if you are incapacitated and there's no players available, or there's no players available or something like that, that you should be able to choose fade to black, or choose fade to black, but you're choosing to say NPCs come rescue me, and they take you back to the hospital and you get revived, and you didn't use one of your lives. You just get taken back to an appropriate medical facility, because you can be downed with tier 2 injuries. You get taken back to a clinic, a space station. You could pick an NPC, Endeavor, any one of the space stations, any of the hospitals. I am totally fine with fade to black, because as far as a player is concerned, you are experiencing exactly what happens in real life. If you suffer a severe traumatic injury, or you have a heart attack or a stroke, or go into severe shock from sepsis or something like that, that's all it is. You're fading to black, and the you being downed, and you just press the button and you're calling Space 911, and you wake up and, oh God, what happened? Oh, someone came to got me. Thank goodness. Cool. You press your life alert button on your chest before you fade out, and Space 911 comes to get you. Exactly as was described by Richard Tyrer right here. We're going to watch it here in a few minutes. Medbed permissions. If a medical bed is within your ship, vehicle, or base, then you may set permissions limiting who can use it to heal and imprint independently. Only you overrules all other options. Everyone overrules options below. Friends, party members, org members. Um, and again, this is just a start for permissions. I imagine that they will create a permission system that allows for a bit more nuance. So you can allow other people who aren't friends. You don't have to put everybody who wants to come use your base hospital because that's your method of income or whatever. I don't feel like you should have to befriend all those people, but just be able to say, like, maybe something based off of reputation, and so on. Because I do want that option for players who want to be like, oh, I want to have my own hospital, and I want to allow people to stop by and put it, store an imprint here and regenerate here, but they shouldn't have to like find you and send a friend request or join your party or your org. But you also like should be able to limit it to more than just everyone. But again, this is just a starting point, and being able to
Part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Thank you so much for the follow, Towerback. Appreciate it. Because obviously we need a little bit more nuance than everyone, because then, like, is it just anyone that you let in? Oh yeah, the timer needs to be long. Yeah, well, and I totally agree with you, because like it should be your choice to say, because like our timer's pretty long right now. It should be your choice to say, you know what, I'm gonna call for a player, and the player's got an extended response time, and okay, sweet. This needs a lot more nuance, and again, this is just some of the stuff, but this needs a lot more nuance than multiple regeneration option. You need to have the choice to be able to say, I want to be, I want to be revived on scene. I want to be, and then a sub menu say, do you want to be stabilized on scene? Do you want to be treated on scene? I want to be revived on scene and transported to an appropriate clinic. Yeah, respawn should always be immediate. Yeah, there should be no transport time. If you choose to have the faux NPC come and get you, it's already inconvenient enough that you're at Ghost Hollow. Yeah, it should absolutely be teleportation. But I think it should also be a within reason thing. Like, you shouldn't be able to say, well, I'm going to just off myself so that way I can teleport to 4 systems away. Well, it's suspension of disbelief. Because yes, it is a game, but it's believability. It's believability in that you are able to call for anyone, who does. No. That's not how this works. These things are not mutually exclusive. It is a game, but it has to have like gameplay. No, it's not the same thing. There's no believability that a beam can transport medicine through armor and a vacuum suit. But there is a believability that you can fade to black and, rapid passage of time. Because it is a game. It's enough suspension of disbelief. It doesn't have to be that strict. But like it also needs to be within reason, because you shouldn't have fade to black teleportation far across the system or into another planetary system. Arcless, you can Ackless, you can argue semantics all you want, but those are not the same thing at all. That's everything has degrees, and it's far less believable from a medical gameplay standpoint for beams to be a thing. I think you should be able to be to like stay in your down state for a long time, and wait. But I think that if you choose to be transported, that you should have a very short wait to wake up in, you are on Daymar, and there's a station that is is multiple stations within a very short jump distance away. That it's it's conceivable that it could be rapid, because you were talking about a matter of a couple minutes. That is fade to black, and then you wake up 10 minutes later. That's unnecessary friction. See, I hate the beam. I hate the beam. The beam is silly gamification, because it's either you're close enough, just do the animation and make it believable. But the beam doesn't add anything over the animation. Because if it's far enough away, now it just looks ridiculous. It looks like WoW from 2005, where you've got your magical green healing beam to somebody way over there. And I'd be fine with like a fade to black, and you maybe, I don't know, 1 to 2 minutes. But that's the thing, is like, it shouldn't take so long for you to wake up at a clinic or a hospital that is a very short jump away. Because if you think about, with the new QT system and the flight model and everything, think about how fast you can get to a station. It's no time at all. Especially with a smaller ship. Yeah, beams are easy. That's why we have them for now. But CIG doesn't. CIG developed this entire inverse kinematic system for us to push buttons on doors. And you think that they're going to retain the medical beam? I don't know. And not only push buttons on doors, but interact with your cockpit. And so you think that they're going to abandon all reality and just keep beams forever. But yeah, doors don't move. Exactly. And I don't think you should be able to execute the animation on somebody who is moving. If you want to get healed, hold the fuck still. I don't know. It's like, people will be like, is game, and it's like, but everything else in the game. Everything else in the game. So why is medical special, but everything else in the game has this high level of fidelity and immersion, but medical is a beam? And after CIG said that beam is just that way, it's just beam so that way we can get it in. And they said that as they were building it before they moved, to get it in the basic function before the active feature team moved over to Squadron. Yeah, not everything needs to be a beam. Things that should be a beam should be a beam. Like a tractor beam. The claw is an entirely different thing. But I also think that the claw could come back in a way with Maelstrom. But what we have now is temp, because we don't have Maelstrom. Maelstrom is what allows for us to have far better hole munching than the silly thing that we have right now. But it's a laser that lets them get the gameplay in the in the short term, so that way people have gameplay. I'm glad we have the beam for now, but when the development timeline allows for it, get rid of the beam and allow me to. I don't like the repair beams either. No, I know they said they're not going back to the claw, and I hope that they do something more interesting than what we have is now for hole munching. Yeah, no, the grabbing. I'm not saying the claw is coming back. I'm saying something can come back that isn't what we have now. What we have now is the very easy thing that is very, very, very much faked. And Maelstrom allows for a lot more physics to be involved that can make it better. I don't think it will ever, I don't think we're going to get the claw back, but I think we're going to get something better than what we have now, if that makes sense. But yeah, that like this interface, I think the way this looks in just sort of a mock-up is good, but I think that each one of the different options should have sub options so that a player can have lots of different things to choose from. So you are downed, and you can choose to be revived on scene, and that's all that you want. You are downed, you can choose to be revived on scene and then stabilize. Somebody hits you with the appropriate drugs to treat your symptoms. Revived on scene and then treat your injuries. Hey, I've got a tier 1 injury. I can't make it back to my ship because it's way the F over there or something. Can you please, or I can make it back to my ship, but I don't have the supplies, to then make it back to the hospital. Can you just treat me here? I need to, or I want to finish my mission or something. And see, like for me, this is a and like if you want healing, that's a different beacon. And like personally, I would love for you to have to make like preset choices to the menu before you go into a location or something. But I can see where they make it more gamified in order to make it more approachable for more people and do the whole is game thing. But the game having the choices available to you lets you do things that are more believable. And the other thing is, to me, downed is not unconscious. Fade to black is unconscious. So you are down, but you can't get up. You are too hurt. You are too injured. You're just looking at your Moby and then, okay, I'm calling 911. And instead of having to pick up your phone and talk to a dispatcher, you're able to, do the McDonald's menu of services you want. And you quickly punch it in before you fade, fall into unconsciousness or whatever. Well, and maybe they go with a beacon. I don't know. I'm just saying I don't disagree with this, because I think that this with more choice is fine for the vast majority of players. Would I like more nuance? Yes. Sorry, would I like it to be require more planning? Yes. But I am more on I want the game to be harder. I want the game to be more sim. But I can see where this is an avenue where, and using your Moby doesn't require, that's far different than being able to pick up a gun. You're using your Moby on your wrist with your fingers or something like that, or you could even they could fake it and say you're talking to it, voice to text or something. That's far different than picking up a weapon. Got lots of weapons right there. They're heavy and require different manipulation. But to me, this is like, whether it's a beacon you pre-configure, to me, it's no big deal which way it is. I just want us to have choices and have those choices be more than just where do you regenerate. Because right now, we have all these choices, options of the same thing. It's all just regeneration. You either wait for somebody to come pick you up or it's regenerate. You have two options. One of them, just gives you change of location. And to me, that is shit choice for players. But Atlas, the other thing, and somebody mentioned it, was it Socially Confused? Was that you talking about it? One thing I do want, for sure, absolutely has to happen, is a auto revive module on your armor. So you can choose to equip it in lieu of other things. You only get so many subcomponent slots on your suits based off the type you're wearing, and say, oh, okay, well, I want this one, and this one will auto revive me, and it's got a one-time charge. And maybe it's a one-time use thing. Maybe you have to refill it after each use. So okay, well, I'm revived, I'm back up. Now I need to treat myself, oh, but I'm still getting shot out. Do I treat myself or do I hurry up and recharge my thing? Yeah, spot for, an auto med pen. Oh God, I can't remember the book. I read a sci-fi book that had that, but it could be, and that's just a med pen option. There's a lot of different things that they could do with that. Like a, because like one of the things I really want is for if your armor / suit become damaged, you lose integrity, which again, peak fucking sci-fi. Suit option, it isn't just their stats, but what you can equip on them to give you even further choice. Absolutely, yeah. But we don't have, I don't think there's ever been any mention. If they have, I've missed it, but we don't have your suit integrity where you take damage to your spacesuit and now you've got exposure to vacuum. Okay, well, you can you leak oxygen, but also exposure to vacuum, and so you have an auto thing that auto seals your suit. You have that one of those equipped if you're doing a lot of EVA work, like you're doing some EVA salvage, or mining in somewhere without an atmosphere. I don't know. That's another auto option that I think that would be really cool, because the other option being you use a tool, just like you use a tool for your treating your symptoms and everything. We should have a suit repair tool that can seal you up, that can do a patch job on your armor. I want our armor to have an armor integrity thing, and so for that to be the remit of maybe the medic. Maybe the medic not only carries a med gun, but also carries things for sealing patches in your suit, so that way you aren't exposed to the atmosphere, but also patches up your armor, so that way it gets your armor back up a certain percentage, or what have you, to prevent you from being injured so easily again. Like if you get a tier 3 injury because your armor take a hit, you patch it up and it reduces the chance of you getting a tier 2 injury if you get shot again. That sort of thing. But yeah, this is a good start, but I see Regenerate on here, and this is unavailable because it's not there, but they're giving you 4 options to regenerate and deploy a medical beacon. That sucks. If your only option is to use one of your lives or wait for rescue, that sucks. And it's not consistent with what they have talked about for 11, 12 years. We still have game chat available, so you can still chat in game. That's I don't necessarily like that, but at the same time, players are going to do it anyway outside of games, so it's like whatever. Yeah, whether it's I'm just saying I want that ability for someone. Whether it's the medic, whether it's someone else who's got tools, some sort of engineer, specialist, I don't know. Yeah. That would be really cool if you set a beacon and then it instantly opens up a chat window to you, because then essentially you could just fake like you're doing voice to text or something like that, or life alert, what's the nature of your emergency? Absolutely. Armor needs to get to the point where you can't repair it, you can replace it. It gets bricked by damage. But we do need the ability to repair those things. Yeah, you'd never be able to stop them from using Discord, so you can't make it go away. But like, I would like it to be in game, it just connects you with your rescue. Incapacitated invo, it just tells you that doesn't change. And then these are just all talking about the options. So, rescue beacon. Since the launch of Alpha 4.0, the rescue beacon system has suffered from several legacy design elements that are waiting to be updated. So that's the part that's confusing to me. So we're getting like what functionality is coming back with beacons with 4.3.1? Like, yeah, it needs to be updated. So are they working or are they not? Like, where are we at with them? And that's what's confusing to me. With the increased player capacity of 600 people, the existing notification system became unmanageable and needs to be refactored. So has it been refactored? Are they in? With the addition of multiple star systems, the marker system needs to be updated to provide intermediate destinations. I think that is entirely unnecessary. I think the idea that someone will respond to your beacon from another system over shouldn't be a thing. I think that's kind of silly to even consider that. Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think that's a necessary feature they need to have in there. You like, especially with 600 players and soon to be thousands of players per shard, and probably thousands of players in each planetary system. Your beacon doesn't need to go out that far, and somebody doesn't need to be like, oh yeah, my ETA is 35 minutes. What? No. Yeah, that's what he said, but then like that's what was confusing. Was it in here? Where are they talking about it before? Was it up at the top? I could have sworn they talked about it, or maybe it was up at the top. Yeah, they're still not working. Okay. Yeah, and like it's conceivable that your beacon would go, could technically be transported that far, but to me, like the beacon is this little local transmittal thing, not something that it sends up a signal flare that everyone can see across the universe. With both factors, a better way of finding and sorting them is needed. Additionally, we need several UI improvements, including a way for first responders to see the last several medical beacons the player has sent to better judge the likelihood of an ambush. While we can provide no dates or estimates for when these fixes and additions will arrive, we want to acknowledge that we're aware of the issues and reiterate our intention to address these issues on our road to 1.0. Ooh, yeah, no dates, but that's a long ways out. A note to the first responders: of the many aspects that excite us about this universe we continue to build each and every release, medical gameplay, and specifically the role of first responders in the verse, is something that inspires many of us to continue bringing these facets to life. Whereas mining, salvage, transport, racing, combat, and more all provide personal dividends and credits, loot, bragging rights, the acts of those who dedicate their time specifically, intentionally, and frequently towards helping others has a nobility and positive effect on everyone. These are acts we want to better support going forward. This begins with the medical bed evolutions listed above and continues through restoring and improving the beacon system in the future. But there's even more we can do on our journey towards Death of a Spaceman and Star Citizen 1.0. It will take time, and we'll share more details as those releases approach. But in the meantime, we wanted to say that we see you, those people who fight not for riches and individual prosperity, because paramedics don't get paid shit, but to help your fellow citizen day in and day out and make the persistent universe a better place to live in. Thank you for helping others, and we're exploring what more we can do to help you along the way. Yeah, and unless the beacon got relayed through the system that they use to relay data, like, yeah, for the love of God, Stark's Realities, give us fucking NPC rescue missions. Because like that should be how you practice. When we get actual healing gameplay with medbeds, like we talked about earlier, the way you get good is by practicing on NPCs and building up that rep and saying, yeah, I'm a great doctor and I can heal your injury this fast. Because that should be part of the incentive. It is, I will pay more to have somebody who is really good at healing come heal my tier 1 injury and get me back into the fight faster with less side effect. NPCs heal each other now. They do. It doesn't always work, but it does happen. I've had it happen multiple times. Yeah, being an SC paramedic is absolutely a losing job right now. But you know, it's supposed to be a pretty big thing. Nope, you are not the only one. You, Fat Old Lion, you are in very good company here. Yep. So we looked at this part about Death of a Spaceman, where they talked about your body being recovered, you know, and you know, having wear and tear in your body, you get injuries and stuff, but your body being recovered and you being revived. And then he talks later on down here. They talk about like how many lives you will get, what qualifies as a death, you know, and so that's the there's a lot more in here, but basically this is what what they were talking about, that you could die and not necessarily have a death, or it is a death but you are being revived, but it isn't regeneration. And we didn't have regeneration at this point. You just only had so many lives. But that's why, like, even at this point you had multiple lives, because you could be recovered, if that makes sense. You could be recovered. That's why you had lives, because, you know, as long as you know, you didn't run out of lives, you could still conceivably be recovered. But this didn't adequately explain, like, wait a minute, how did somebody recover your body when your ship went nuclear and you were just atoms? Really? That's why they created Regen. Because, like, a lot of these things, they could say that, you know, yeah, a medic found you. You got headshot during boarding, but it didn't splatter your brains. You know, you know, you had a helmet on, and so it knocked you unconscious. You had a severe head injury, but, you know, advanced medicine was able to fix the problem. But that's why I see each character you play having the ability to die, and that's why things are in quotes, multiple times before the character is finally put to rest. Think of this like lives in an old school arcade game. Science in the future is far more advanced than today. Medicine has the ability to bring people back from what would be considered dead in today's world. So if they are able to bring you back, you died, but they bring you back, you know, with your original body, you didn't regenerate. That's why this is here. While a lot of scenarios could have been explained away by diligent NPC emergency response teams finding injured players and bringing them back to civilization, with a game like Star Citizen, there were a lot of cases where even the bravest ambulance pilots wouldn't have been able to retrieve you. Size 9 torpedo, flying yourself into the sun. There's a reason they use those specific instances, not talking about, like, you know, FPS combat. What ambulance is going to rescue you from that? So, like, what they're talking about is you have like two different sets of lives. You can be injured lots of times, and, you know, the injuries essentially will, you know, have a cumulative effect. But, you know, you have the ability to die and be brought back with your same body without regenerating, but also we can't get your body back to revive you. You can't. Yeah, it can be rescued. Technically correct, which is the most important type of correct. But yeah, there are all these instances in Star Citizen where, you know, there is no medical gameplay to be achieved. There is no you are downed, you know, and you know, and you could possibly revive. You just went straight to jail. You had the big die. You know, right now, you know, and less of it now because our ships get soft death, but that's what a huge part of what Maelstrom and engineering and all that are for, is to create a system where combat evolves in space so that you can still win, but you win by disabling the ship, and people don't just go, the ship doesn't go kaboom. People don't have to constantly, claim their ship, and you don't constantly have to be regenerated from your ship going kablooey. Like, that's one of the biggest ones. The ships still go kablooey, with soft death, and CIG doesn't want that. They don't want you to constantly be claiming your ship, and they, based off of this and what they've said, they don't want you to be constantly regenerating. So I'm going to pause the music for a second. And let's listen to this clip, and then I'll read what he said. Because, again, British. Here, we'll even turn on subtitles.
Dead bodies. But as Chris calls out, death is going to be a really important factor in Star Citizen. Now, death, there's kind of 3 deaths along the spectrum. There's kind of what we're calling like the down state. So that's kind of like when your health has gone to 0 and you're there. And when you're in that scenario, you'll be able to kind of choose to kind of stay there and be like, okay, I need my buddies to come and rescue me. I need
I need my buddies to come and rescue me. Okay. So, medical rescue. Beacon. I need my buddy. I either your friends who are already there, they come get you up, or Beacon.
law enforcement to come and help me, or maybe I've paid for some insurance that rescues my body or something like that.
Law enforcement to come help me? You mean NPC security? Like they talked about, it's like this guy right here, that one, talked about at CitizenCon during the 1.0 presentation, where the response time for NPC security would be dictated by like essentially the probability volume, the level of security and how far away you are from civilization and such. And then the level of security would be dictated by the threat, essentially, up to and including the UE Navy showing up with, a battle group and obliterating you. But he just talked about NPC security, and essentially he's talking about space EMS coming and, subsumption behaviors. Yep. I need, law enforcement to come in and get me. And so to me, he's saying they can come and get you. Now, do they, and in the next part, he says insurance recovers your body. And so to me, that's talking about you could have law enforcement do this part. They come and get you, or your medical insurance, they come and get your body. And just like in Death of a Spaceman, your charred body, but you're able to be revived. It's not a new body. It's the same body. Maybe you did even technically die, but they're able to bring you back, just like I've done in, in the last 2 decades, multiple times. But it's not. I don't think anyone disagrees with any of this. The point of contention is respawn versus regen, and that's the problem. Is we have the top 2 people in the company right now, right here. And yeah, this was 5 years ago. But again, this was them reiterating what they've been saying for years, expanding on it, and then talking about what eventually led to Regeneration, which was reiterated right here. We just read it. And so why would we go from this, which they continue to reiterate through these many pieces that the questions that they answered and pieces that they wrote over the next 2 years, to then go to this, where you only have revive via beacon or regen. Only regen. Yeah. Yeah, the fat old line. Whether EMS is government or one of more competing providers, there has to be a system of organized medical rescue and treatment. That's exactly what the narrative team said. Hold on, let me find it. It's maybe it's not. Oh, because it was a medical question. Hold on. I can Google it. There we go. Here we go. Found it. That's how many times I've searched for these things. I know what keywords to search to find the right obscure lore makers community questions. Nobody. Emergency. Okay. Yeah, because this one wasn't. This was all regen stuff, and this is a medical thing. So, what's life like in the emergency medicine profession? Question. I'm interested in the lore behind the medics and doctors of Star Citizen's verse. As well as we all know, the verse is a cold and dangerous world where death lurks around every corner. It's only natural for hospital staff and paramedics to be, and no, that's not correct. Most of the verse is not like that. It's only natural for hospital staff and paramedics to be up armored or even more respected, right? No, they would be up armored if you're in a hospital in the city. It's not a thing. Are they paid better than we would consider today? God, I hope so. What's the EMS system look like? And are there any prominent individuals that pioneered emergency medicine for the future? So they talk about the hospitals and the care centers, but so next, you also asked about paramedics and emergency medical services. There are many different kinds of emergency medical service providers in the verse. Some of them work for planetary governments, others for individual hospitals, and the vast majority of such groups, are private companies that provide different specialties and/or zones of operation. For example, Rajora Rescue, a Tavaran volunteer organization providing free medical services to Tavaran communities around the verse, and using their efforts to help renew a sense of cultural pride and identity amidst their diaspora. That's why we had that. What was the name of the rescue organization that they showed in the guild's presentation? Hmm. I can't remember the name. It was something rescue. But that would be one of these organizations that these private organizations you could work for. But essentially, like if in my head, if you call for a beacon, the beacon, and it's either a player is responding to the beacon, but the beacon is essentially you are calling their dispatch, calling Space 911, and whoever has jurisdiction over the area, puts out the call. And if an NPC shows up, it's that government entity or whoever has jurisdiction. But if a player shows up, you're a contractor is working. Boom, problem solved. Yeah, if you have a home and you pay taxes. But yeah, let's finish listening to this. But yeah, so law enforcement, essentially, the EMS comes in, picks you, either gets you up or retrieves your, dead, dying body to take you back to the hospital. You get revived.
There and be like, okay, I need my buddies to come and rescue me. I need the law enforcement to come and help me, or maybe I've paid for some insurance that rescues my body or something like that. Then there is the kind of like you've died in terms of you've given up the ghost, nobody's coming. You're like, okay, that's it. I'm leaving that body there, and I'm gonna go back to a hospital and be revived. But that's kind of part of your DNA. That DNA is kind of going to be reimpregnated into essentially a clone of you, and then
DNA reimpregnated into a clone of you. That's what eventually became Regeneration. But the way they wrote Regeneration is that you would almost never willingly choose that. And that's why Regeneration is really only supposed to be for those instances where you couldn't be recovered. And the idea that, okay, nobody's coming, well, someone should always come. There should always be someone coming. There should always be a player or an NPC who comes to get you. There should never be the timer is going to expire unless you're way out in the middle of nowhere. The vast majority of the Star Citizen universe should have security EMS coverage where or players where someone should come. It should be a rare instance where the timer runs out and you have to regenerate. No one ever finds your body in time. The statement supports that when choose to recovered to a hospital is second death. Except for he calls the second death, you are, listen, rescue, I pay for some insurance that rescues my body. First death, rescues my body.
Law enforcement to come and help me, or maybe I've paid for some insurance that rescues my body or something like that. Then there is
Second death is regeneration because it's a new body. Second death, new body. First death, same body. Second death, new body, same. Yeah, he says hospital, but like you can't fault him for not saying hospital in the for the first death. Like you have insurance where somebody comes and picks up your body. Well, obviously they're going to take you to a hospital. Yeah. I'm just going by what we have. And like you can be pedantic all you want about it, but he's saying deaths. And he's saying one death you have a new body, one death you don't. Same body. Yeah, one and the one is you fade to black, but it's new body. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is new body versus same body. But either way, one is a death same body, one is a death new body, and the difference is death new body means you used up a life. Death same body, you didn't use up a life. And not being able to have a choice for respawn that doesn't involve using a death is bad. That is bad design. Especially after. Hey, Fatal Lion, I'm glad you came by. No worries. This will be uploaded to my YouTube Tuesday. Yeah. And the Discord is always open, so always stop on by. But yeah, to me, this first one is the option. The first death is the options that we as players need in addition to regenerate. And I think that the majority of the time players should not choose to regenerate, but either choose to be revived on scene or choose to have their body recovered, because at this point you're not dead. You're mostly dead, or you're not dead, but you should choose to have your body recovered, by security, insurance pays for it, blah, 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 taken to the hospital. Because if they're recovering your body, it's not the first part where someone gets you up, where law enforcement comes and saves you. That's the differentiation to me is they say either your buddies are coming to get you, law enforcement's coming to get you up, or or someone's recovering your body. In that you were going to fade to black, but you didn't die. Someone revives you. I think it does imply that you respawn. If somebody's recovering your body, how are you not responding? If someone comes and revives you, yeah, you're not being respawned. You are waking up here. The waking up here, and maybe you get treated in place, maybe you evac yourself, it doesn't matter. But someone recovering your body, to me, absolutely implies respawn. Not regen, respawn. Just like they talked about in Death of a Spaceman, which is what this was an update to, where your body is recovered and you are revived. Yeah, dragging your ass back to the hospital in real time to save regen. Yes, exactly. That's all I'm asking is that regen and respawn not be the same, not be, respawn not having to equal regen. Having regen being respawn, but also this being a different respawn that doesn't use a regen. Yeah, and I'm fine with real time, but again, not my decision to make. My thing that I care about is not having regen being the only option for respawn. Like if it takes a couple minutes, it takes a couple minutes. I'm fine with that. I think it should be punishing, because if you are at this point, you made mistakes. There should be consequences. And the overwhelming majority of the time, you should be able to just choose to have somebody come get you up and keep going about your day. But I also think that if you're at this point and you're like, I can't continue with this mission, I'm too injured, I don't want to continue with this mission, I just want to go back to the hospital and log out or go do something else or whatever, it's too hard, I shouldn't have attempted this. Cool. Just respawn me back at the hospital and give me 2 minutes, and that's fine. Because it's going to take you away from this. You're giving up on that mission, but at least gives you the option to say, I want to be treated and transported, not treated on scene. Because that's an option. That's what I do in real life. I can treat somebody on scene, I can treat and transport them. If you fade to black, you call 911 and an ambulance responds and they find you unconscious on the ground, I'm going to pick you up, I'm going to put you in the ambulance, I'm going to treat you and take you to the hospital. That's exactly what happens. It's called implied consent. So, believability. If you want to say it takes 2, 3, 5 minutes, I don't give a fuck. However you want to balance it, that's a CIG problem. I just want us to have the option. I want us players to have better choices and more meaningful choices, and choices that have much more of an air of believability than, well, everything ends up in 3D print a new human. Because this would also, by having the option, A, for NPCs, B, for players to come get you up, but C, to have, I'm just going to call 911 and, have them come pick me up as if I fade to black, and, boom, you're good to go. Then that also will reduce the amount of times that people will choose to regen at their bed that shouldn't regen in the first place. It should be a better option to get transported to that space station that's 3 minutes away than spend 100,000 credits on a unit of regen gel in a tier 3 bed that shouldn't be able to 3D print a human. I feel like the option of, I feel like that's a better and more believable option than we're going to throw regen out, and regen was always the option, was always the way, or whatever they ended up saying after they said all this, where no, regen is only a last ditch thing. You don't want to regen, you'll have a giant concussion like event, and you won't be able to just get right back into the fight. That's why I'm so vehemently against the whole, just make it use resources. And it's no, it needs to be more of a deterrent, but also we need to have more options. It can't just be beating players over the head with a stick. You need to give them a better alternative, and I want an alternative that it has at least a more believable sense. And to me, that's what fade to black after calling 911 and get transported, and you wake up in a med bed a couple minutes later is, with a fat fucking bill, because it's the 30th century and Star Citizen is a dystopia and the UE is not kind. But it should also be less than 100,000 credits for a 3D print, new 3D printed human that costs you your IVS score.
Is the kind of you've died, in terms of you've given up the ghost, nobody's coming, you're like, okay, that's it. I'm leaving that body there, and I'm going to go back to a hospital and be revived. But that's kind of part of your DNA. That DNA is kind of going to be reimpregnated into essentially a clone.
Good night, High Prince of Dragon.
And then you'll be able to then go back to your location, and you'll be able to see, your dead body there. And as long as nobody's been there, you'll be able to retrieve your gear and so on and so forth. And then the third aspect in terms of like you passing on.
And he says, as long as nobody's been there. That's one of the things that, like, in terms of balancing, if you choose a NPC to come and do your treat and transport you, they pick up your body, take you to the hospital to be healed and revived. Full loot. If you are in a PvP area, if there's players nearby, you got downed by players, absolutely full loot. If that's your choice, rather than waiting for somebody to respond to your beacon or having players get you up. If you're like, I can't win this fight, I'm giving up. All right, if you give up, then the people who are around you have access to your loot. None of this item recovery bullshit, bricked nonsense, Like, I hate the bricking thing. I think it's silly. But, yeah, absolutely full loot. Well, and that's the thing, is a lot of them do space combat, and space combat is still a whole lot of big ship go big boom. And yeah, absolutely. And that's probably like I'm lenient on things as long as players have more choice, and the choice is things have more of air of believability. I want things to be harder, but I know that I'm not the majority in that. Like, I want more hard mode. I want more consequences. But I also like, and I think a lot of the balancing of that is just in where you end up playing in Star Citizen. If you want to be a Care Bear, pick to Terra. If you want more consequences, you go to Pyro or Null. But regardless of where you are, if you engage in PvP, you are accepting the risks, and if you play the game, you have to accept that there is going to be PvP. You just have to decide how much risk of PvP you want. That's up to you. Yeah, the timer thing too. I absolutely agree with the timer, because even if there aren't players around, if someone shows up right afterwards, like in short order, I think that's valid too. But like, I think your body should, if you get rescued by NPCs and you're just doing PvE content, again, believability. It's a little bit more believable if things stick around a little bit. But I think a lot of it, it's based off of like the players don't have to be in the room with you. They don't have to be the ones responsible for downing you. But if they're within a certain amount of kilometers, your stuff should be available for loot, and that's your choice. It'd be like, oh, okay, well, if I'm gonna be full loot because there's other players nearby, then all right, I'll just wait for the beacon or something, because I don't see them around here. They didn't down me. I'm in a PvE area, but somebody's nearby. So that, again, player choice. Yeah, realism is for the PU, but even fighters aren't gonna go big kaboom. I haven't had pardon me. I did a crap ton of the ghillie missions during Invictus launch week during May. I didn't go big kaboom once in my F7A Mark II. Not once. Like, I got soft death a lot. And you know what I did when I soft death? I backspaced, because that was the best option. And we need to be working towards getting rid of that option so that isn't the thing. Or backspace isn't it doesn't just mean regeneration every time you do it. You call for transport because it should be faster, but a lot of this is the fact that we don't have NPCs that can do the jobs, and we only have so many players, and that's a problem.
Onto your next of kin and that kind of thing. So what we're actually evaluating now is kind of how this is integrated into kind of like the core healing gameplay and the actor stuff.
Yeah, and so this was the lead up into Alpha 315 with the medical system, but that's the 3 deaths, and right now we really don't have that in its entirety, because you can wait for your friends to come and get you, but we don't have the security that can come and revive you. We don't have the recovery of your body and transporting you to the hospital to be revived. We only have you get picked up or you regenerate. And that's why I don't think that this is the final product, because it gives us such shit options. And what they're talking about here is a multitude of options that you can choose based off of the environment you're in, what your priorities are. Yeah. Well, and I think it's fine to be able to loot cash paid gear as long as someone, the player who paid cash for it, has a means to get it back, but in a way that, like, just like with insurance, like, you don't lose it permanently, but you can only claim it so often, and get a new one, just like with ships. Which part, Eklis? In the table? Which table? This table? Oh, the deploying a beacon initiates the flow for deploying a beacon. But, like, I mean, that could mean more, but that's all they say. So until I get more, yeah, it may mean more options. I don't know. I hope it does. I hope you're right. I want you to be right. But that's not a lot. And especially because they haven't talked about the part of us being either revived by security or transported by EMS back to the hospital since this part, and then talking about the lore in here. Sorry, I know this is white mode. That's what I want to hear from CIG, because not mentioning it here does not fill me with confidence. And I feel like that would be a huge loss to us as players. For the flashbang. What about flashbangs? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sorry. But this is why, like, this stuff that we're talking about is why I did the video saying we need NPC trauma teams, because CIG's ability to implement NPC trauma teams is already practically here. They have the ingredients. They would probably need a good amount more development, but they're not starting at square zero to really mitigate a whole lot of this. And I think it would be A, really great to have more options, but B, it's another money sink. And that's all that it is a money sink that gives you different options than regeneration. Because right now, we have this big old money sink. It's 100K for every one of these things. Okay, well, how about giving us more options on how to spend our money that aren't just these first 4? and then 15K here. Give me options to, do other things with my money that let me play the game how I want to play it. Within reason, and different sets of consequences. Yeah, it is too easy to get rich. Yeah, we need more money sink. And if the cost of regeneration gets players to play differently, then in order to avoid the cost of regeneration, then that money sink largely goes away. But if we don't have a way to sink in money for other things, because right now the medical beacon is free to you, it's just 15,000 for the other people. You have to be like, all of these things need to cost you money, but we need more options in how to spend it. Otherwise, people will find ways to not part with their money. Money sink only works if the drain's open. But yeah. I just triggered your Google device. What did it do? But yeah, that's that's basically what I have for like CIG's ideas and plans going forward. We need more options for when we are downed. We need to have more options other than just waiting for a player beacon to get us up, or you regenerate and use up one of your lives that obviously they don't mean anything until we get to Death of a Spaceman. But if this is what we have at 1.0, then we're going to use up a lot of lives, which means they're going to need to give you a lot more lives in order for Death of a Spaceman to not be too punishing. And I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that makes death as meaningful if they give you 45 lives instead of 9. I don't think players will respect it as much, even with the cost of it. But we also, we still don't have healing gameplay. And that is something that they talked about in, only briefly, but it was in the RSI Apollo Q&A. Here we are getting the RSI Apollo, and the only gameplay we're getting is the use of resources to heal and regen. Will there be any interactive doctor gameplay to healing in med bays and first aid, or will it be automatic based on the tier of healing? The design for doctor medical gameplay is not fully signed off, but it currently has interactive elements to it. One of the things that we always want to do with Star Citizen is to make player interactions physical rather than just pressing a button and walking away. An example being the current mining loop that requires a level of constant control instead of automatic extraction. That's all we need for healing. We need something that requires input from you and choice from you, and have an easy mode that gets the job done, but isn't as effective as if you are skilled. And there's so many ways that they can balance that to reward players, and also to then be able to have players advertise that to either get paid more or get requested more via their reputation and their skill. But then we also need not only the medical gameplay, make healing interesting, because the stabilization of symptoms is already interesting. You make it even more interesting by removing the auto mode, then all the better. But we need that, but for medbed. And ideally, we need different types of resources for medbeds too, based off the different injuries. You need, you should be able the one size fits all med gel. It's like, I don't know about that. I think because you have to pick the right medicine for injuries, I think it's important that we have to pick the right things for healing rather than just get bar in green zone and have blue box inside bed. The flow is just too simple. And just to reiterate, because people think that the easy way is what CIG wants. They reiterated it in both of these pages, but it's been that way since the beginning. So this was the Q&A for the Misk Endeavor, Part 3 from 2015, I think it was. With the Hope class ship, do you see medical as being a complete profession? Because that's a thing that a lot of people don't think that medical should be a profession, because it's not in other games. Because you always just die and respawn over and over and over again. There isn't really much to medical in so many other games, so many other FPS games, and that's never been the intent for Star Citizen. The medical profession is one of the more important occupations within Star Citizen, and it's intended to be one of the larger and more flexible roles. Larger and more flexible. On the FPS combat front, medics will be invaluable. They'll be able to perform field triage that can heal some injuries entirely and mitigate others enough so that the injured party is at least more functional. Conserve fighting strength. The effects of more serious injuries can often be showed so that there is a better chance of reaching, or slowed, so there is better chance of reaching a hospital, or a more advanced medical apparatus can improve the chances of survival. That's why, this is why I think we need injury stabilization with the lower tier bed. That's what I can do in the ambulance right now, or in my aircraft. Depending on what you have available, gives you the ability to stabilize conditions. You can't heal that condition, but you can stabilize it in order to get them to the hospital. Or you get to a lower tier hospital, like, oh yeah, I can heal these things, but I can't heal these things, but I've got more options for stabilizing them than the ambulance does in order to get them to the next level. And so it gives more things for tier 3 and tier 2 beds to do for those more severe injuries. And I think the best example I can give for what we really need for medical and healing is what they did for, if you remember, the ISC on engineering, where they talked about all the roles for engineering. The mechanic and the what's the one that does all the tuning, the tuner. We need essentially like 3 roles like that for the medical profession. Your medic that revives people and treats their symptoms in order to get them evacuated. Your doctor that focuses on the healing. And then your medical logistics expert. You could call them the pharmacist, and they're the ones that craft the materials that your doctors and your medics need to do their jobs with their equipment. I feel like that's the kind of depth that we need in order to make medical and rescue engaging, along with the having more consequences and more options for players that will get this whole loop to where it needs to be, but also get it on parity with the other things that CIG is already doing. It isn't more than engineering. It isn't less than engineering. It isn't more than mining or even more than salvage, but it isn't less than those things. Equal. And that's all I'm asking for. Just asking for a little equality, a little equity in my space game. But yeah, that's all I have for this evening. So let's go ahead and switch screens because I need to get to bed. So let's go ahead. I need a recyclable to farm the Morgans. Yeah. Oh man, I would not put it past CIG to make that happen, and I would not be above participating in that kind of gameplay. I would do that thing. I am in the way IRP is always more chaotic good. Oh no, I'm not saying salvage is where it needs to be. Absolutely not. Like Atlas, because we can't salvage fuel and atmosphere. Lots of ships still don't have components. The hull munching is still this stupid low effort temp solution. No, I'm totally with you on salvage, but we've also got an idea of where salvage is going and what more things are going to be added to it. What they haven't discussed is roles, but I think that we're going to get that eventually, if that makes sense. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Salvage isn't where it needs to be, but I think we have more information about what more they want to do for salvage and what more they could do with salvage Oh, see, I don't think medical is further along than salvage. I think because we can get components and sell them, because we can hull scrape and we can hull munch, I think we have more to salvage than medical, because all we have for medical is symptom treatment. That's it. You press button to heal injury and it goes away. Yeah, they are both basic, just in different ways. But seeing as how they haven't talked about anything about healing gameplay, and they have told us how they want us to, they want to be able to salvage fuel and salvage gases, and there is going to be more to hull munching. I hope with Maelstrom they can get it closer to, oh gosh, what's the salvaging space game? Hard Space, Shipbreakers. I don't think it'll be that in depth, but closer to that than we are now. That makes sense. But yeah, both professions have a long ways to go. And I mean, let's not get the people who want to do science and exploration too riled up. But there's still almost 20 of you guys hanging out in chat, so I just want to say I really appreciate all you guys sticking around. It's been a long show, but there was a lot to talk about, and I hope you found it interesting and engaging. And if you want to talk more, absolutely hop in the Discord. If you're watching this later, leave a comment on the YouTube. I appreciate the engagement. I'm sure we'll talk about this again when we get more updates, but let's go ahead and find someone to raid, because I'm all about paying it forward. And that way I can get to bed, because I have to go teach in the morning. Ooh, we're going to raid Nomadic Aviator. I've raided him before. He's a super good dude. He's a Black Hawk pilot, so one of my people. And we'll go give him some... He's got a pretty sweet sim rig. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night.